Hello everyone, and welcome to another part of What If Deku Had the Infinity Gauntlet. If you enjoy, please like and subscribe. It motivates me to make more. I did not write the story. The original writer is Lord Wolf. Please support them. Now let's dive in. It's quiet around here, Ochako yawned. She was sitting on the couch with some friends from class after finishing her homework. The provisional license exam was coming up, so it was nice to have a break from all the training and villain attacks. Mina turned on the television hoping for something that might alleviate the boredom. Flipping channels to the news, she was about to change it again when Ochako told them to wait. What is it? Momo asked. The news was reporting live on the scene. A villain had taken control of Geonosis Tech's building and locked himself inside. Isn't that where your boyfriend works? Tsuyu said aloud. He's not my boyfriend. Ochako argued with a blush. And yes. What's his name? Mina asked, curious to know who Gravity Girl was smitten with. Izuku Midoriya, the news suddenly said, showing a picture of the boy. Police on the scene have revealed the identity of the villain Apotheosis, a known member of the League of Villains. Ha! Ochako's brain stopped working for a moment after they said that. That's not possible. Izuku a villain? Izuku the nicest sweetest boy she knew working for the League? What the? Mina's jaw dropped. Uraraka's crush was a villain? I guess the wedding's off, Tsuyu chimed in. What did they just say? Ida appeared in the room, having just entered in time to hear the report. Apotheosis was the villain that saved him from Stain. Turn it up. Mina fumbled with the remote for a moment before turning the sound up. The news reported All Might himself had entered the building to apprehend the villain. A few minutes later the heroes Kamui Woods and Edshot arrived on the scene and went inside to back him up. After some time more heroes and police showed up, but no one else went inside. The reporters stopped talking when something went flying out the side of the building and crashed straight through another. What's happening? Momo asked, watching the scene. The cameras zoomed into the front of the building where a hole appeared and green-haired boy the same age as the students levitated into the air. That's him. Ochako's eyes widened seeing the boy she knew. Izuku held his gold-covered left arm out and in an instant everything was blown away and the video feed was cut. The students were too shocked for words. What was that? Tsuyu asked. At the scene. Oomph. Izuku slapped his right hand over his mouth as his eyes widened in shock at what he just did. The sheer excitement from the amount of power he now possessed almost made him throw up. Wow, he whispered, looking at his Infinity Gauntlet in amazement. To think that was only 30% with 3 stones. That's enough. Midoriya. All Might appeared, having recovered from getting knocked into a building. He saw the destruction that boy caused and almost couldn't believe what just happened. Oh hello, Izuku smirked down at him as he reached out with the gauntlet and ripped the chunk of concrete that the hero was standing on out of the ground. Whoa! All Might looked around in confusion as he was lifted into the air. Jumping off the floating rock he made to grab Midoriya, but a portal opened between them, sending the hero back to the ground. This is amazing! Izuku exclaimed. He pointed a digit at one of the nearby buildings and watched with joy as a large gash was carved into the side of it in the path his finger was moving. It's even better than hoped it would be. With a wave of his gauntlet the boy lifted up a few turned over cop cars and started juggling them in the air. I'm starting to see why you're so addicted to your power, All Might. What have you done? The hero demanded. It didn't make any sense. Midoriya was supposed to be quirkless, he told him so the day they met. Yet here he was with not only a warping quirk, but also a powerful telekinetic quirk. I leveled the playing field. Izuku smirked down at him from where he was floating. Is that so wrong? That a quirkless person like myself figured out a way to achieve limitless power, he chuckled. What the hell is going on here? A voice shouted. The hero and villain turned to see Endeavor arrived on the scene. Endeavor. All Might called. Ah. More test subjects. Izuku wasn't afraid at all. With the Infinity Gauntlet on his hand, there was nothing to fear anymore. Did you do this? Endeavor turned his glare to the one responsible to all this destruction. A villain arrogantly levitating in the air as if he was above them all. Sneering at the boy he blasted him with fire in an effort to one-up All Might before he took the victory. Wait. He's just boy. The number 1 hero shouted, but was sadly ignored. Izuku's grin widened seeing the fire coming at him. Using the gauntlet he made a quick upwards pulling motion and in seconds all the water from the fountain below him was yanked upwards to collide with the flames and fizzle them out. Water. The ultimate antithesis of fire. Izuku laughed. How are you the number 2 with such an obvious weakness? He questioned while launching all the water at the hero so fast he didn't have time to dodge and was swept away. Stop this. All Might attempted to jump and grab him again, but this time Izuku flash warped away. After the hero's large hand passed through where the boy was, he frantically glanced around. Looking for someone? Izuku appeared higher and away from him with glowing red eyes. Smirking, he reached out to another building and ripped the antennae off with the reality stone and threw it like a spear at All Might. Being in midair, the muscled hero wouldn't be able to dodge, so instead he grabbed it with his hands and safely fell with it to the ground. Nicely done. Izuku applauded him. Please just stop. All Might pleaded again. I don't know what power All for One gave you, but that doesn't mean you should trust Dash. He was cut off by the green-haired teen laughing at him. I turned him down actually. The man paused in surprise. He offered me a quirk and I turned him down. I don't need a quirk, I never did. Waving his left hand, Izuku lifted multiple chunks of concrete. If someone like me can become the strongest person in the world, then that means that quirks aren't as great as everyone made them out to be. With a shout, he tossed the rocks at All Might. They're overrated. Texas Smash. With one punch he reduced all the chunks to pebbles. Not giving Izuku a chance to fight back or teleport away, he rushed through the air so fast the eye couldn't follow. In a second he was within touching distance of the boy, but right when he reached out to grab him, the yellow stone on the gauntlet glowed brightly and then everything stopped. The entire area was encased in a big yellow translucent bubble and everything inside had apparently frozen in time, all except the one who cast it. 10. Izuku smiled seeing All Might frozen still with his big hand inches away from his face. 9. 8. He floated and glided around the hero as if he was in water. 7. 6. 5. 4. Once he was behind All Might, he pointed his gauntlet-covered hand at his back. 3. 2. 1. The bubble dissipated and time resumed. Izuku grabbed the hero with the power of the reality stone, covering him in a red glow. Reiwa. With all his strength he threw All Might straight into the ground below. The impact created a small crater and kicked up a mushroom cloud of dust. Izuku coughed, clutching his throat. How does Kaken scream all the time? I almost ruined my throat. It will take more than that. All Might emerged from the rubble. To defeat the symbol of peace. Izuku just scowled at him. I know it will. He said back. However, instead of fighting me, you should be more worried about evacuating everyone here. Why? Izuku just grinned and pointed a thumb behind him. This building is about collapse. With roar he turned and made a rapid clawing motion with his gauntlet. With his new power he tore a massive chunk out of the corner Geonosis's building. Kamui Woods and Edshot are still in my office, better fetch them. All Might panicked as the building began to lean precariously. Bye. He waved goodbye as a portal opened behind Izuku that he let himself fall through, vanishing without a trace. Damn it. Without thinking twice, the hero soared through the air and crashed through the slowly collapsing building. He landed in Midoriya's office and grabbed the unconscious body of Kamui Woods and the pile of tangled cord that was obviously Edshot. Leaping through the same hole he came from, All Might quickly began gathering up as many injured police as possible. Some of the other heroes began waking up and followed All Might's lead. Even Endeavor reluctantly helped the number one hero get everyone to a safe distance. Once everyone was out of the way, the building finally collapsed, falling to pieces, and with it all the evidence of what Midoriya was working on, that secret room of his. Izuku was smart. He trashed the building to not only escape, but to cover his tracks as well. Elsewhere, Inko was holding her breath while watching the news. She had seen everything. From the announcement from the police about how her son was a known member of the League of Villains called Apotheosis. She watched with shock as they showed live footage of the building where Izuku had sealed himself inside. All Might himself went inside and Inko breathed a sigh of relief. If anyone could bring her son back to her and talk some sense into him, it was the number one hero. Her relief turned to horror as Izuku appeared on the screen levitating in front of the building. He then did something that blew away everything around him and caused the live feed to cut out. What's happening? Where are you, Izuku? She wondered while waiting anxiously for the news to report anything. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hello? She answered. I'm sure you've seen the news by now. That was Izuku's voice. Izuku, Inko spoke quietly. I can imagine what you must think of me. He sighed remorsefully into the phone. Where are you? She asked. I'm sorry, but I can't say, Izuku apologized. Why? Inko wanted to know why he turned into a villain. Where did things go wrong? Izuku just chuckled sadly at her question. Isn't that the question everybody will be asking? He paused for a moment. I just want you to know, Mom, I don't blame you for anything. None of this was your fault. Everything I did and planned to do is all 100% me. Please Izuku, you don't have to do this, she pleaded. Just come home. You have no idea how tempting that offer is. Izuku sounded a bit choked up on the other end of the line. But I can't take it. I started something big. I've come this far, so I might as well go all the way. You don't have to, sweetie. Whatever those villains talked you into, you don't have to do it. I'm sorry, Mom, but I've been planning this since before I joined the League of Villains, he apologized again. I realized a while ago that I can't live a world where people like All Might and Katsuki get everything handed to them on a silver platter just because of a superior quirk. I can't let that fraud get away with it. No. I won't let him get away with his lies. Never again. Izuku quickly calmed himself down. Goodbye, Mom. We'll see each other again when I've made everything right. With those parting words he hung up. Izuku. 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 Inko kept calling her son's name into the phone. She softly cried while hearing the dead tone. At a street corner. Izuku looked down at his phone one last time. He hated hurting his mother like that, but he vowed to himself that he would make it up to her. He stood up from the bench and tossed his phone into the trash, no longer needing it. Walking into the middle of the busy street, he simply waved his gauntlet and forced all the cars to swerve to the left and to the right, making a big open path right down the middle. He waited about a minute and right on cue, the squad car that he was tracking arrived. Izuku smirked seeing his target and pointed his left armor-covered hand at it. The police inside didn't realize what hit them. First they saw a boy in a white lab coat pointing at them, the next thing they knew a portal opened in between them. As soon as the car was halfway through, Izuku snapped it closed, splitting the vehicle in two. The front half with the two officers in it was teleported somewhere else while the back half skid to a stop in front of the boy. Hello Toga, Izuku smiled seeing the girl bound in handcuffs in what was left of the car. Itsukun. Himiko grinned showing her enlarged canines. I didn't think you'd come back from me. I don't abandon friends and allies, he said extending his right hand out for her. I thought you knew that about me. Toga took his offered hand and allowed him to remove her handcuffs with some strange gauntlet he wore. Did I do a good job impersonating you? She already figured out that he used her as a distraction, but she didn't care. Yes you did. Izuku decided to throw her a bone and give her some praise and a pat on the head. You've proven yourself invaluable to me. With another wave of his gauntlet he opened a new portal next to them. Need a ride? You seem so different, Toga grinned. You're more confident than the Izukuan that I knew. Maybe this is the real me? Or maybe this is the new me, he wondered aloud. The teen did feel different ever since he put the Infinity Gauntlet on. He felt as if there was nothing holding him back anymore, like he could be whatever he wanted. Do whatever he wanted. No more restrictions, and no more bastards telling him what he could and couldn't do. For the first time in his life Izuku felt truly free in every sense of the word. Let's go. You need to call Tamura and have him pick you up. Later that night. How did this all go to hell? All Might asked mostly himself. After the incident he had returned to U.A, practically collapsing into his trooper on the couch in the teacher's lounge, having nearly exhausted his power fighting that robot, battling Izuku, evacuating the area and then spending the majority of the night helping the police sift through the debris for any clues to what the boy had done to himself. So far they had found nothing. It was all destroyed when Midoriya collapsed the building. He still hadn't come to terms with that. Where did that boy get these abilities? He said All for One offered him a quirk, but he turned it down. Why would he turn that man down? But what concerned him was that he knew All for One wasn't a person that took no for an answer. That means the villain probably knew what Izuku was up to. Everything he said during their last battle finally made more sense. How are you holding up? In walked Principal Nizu. He too had seen what happened on the news and wanted to check on his fellow educator and friend. I let a boy that I turned into a villain get away. How do you think I'm holding up? Toshinori asked sarcastically. You didn't let him get away, the small white bipedal animal corrected. He caught you by surprise and successfully escaped. There was nothing you could have done against an opponent who thought that far ahead. I should have, the man replied. I'm supposed to be the symbol dash, Nizu cut him off. The symbol of peace and justice, yes I know. The principal walked over and sat himself on the couch next to the hero. I've been giving it some thought. Ever since I saw what happened on the television, I started wondering about Izuku Midoriya. Is it true that he's supposed to be quirkless? He was, not anymore from what All Might had witnessed. Why do you ask? From what I was able to gather about him online, he's a very intelligent boy. Graduated middle school early and got into one of the best non-heroic schools in the country, top of his class, interned for Geonosis Tech and designed a line of new support devices. The company even praised him for his supposedly amazing quirk analysis skills. Nizu listed off all the things he already knew about the kid. Were you going with this? Toshinori asked. Coupled with that new invention of his, he would made a wonderful hero, way to twist the knife of guilt further in. Though something he just said made the hero pause. What new invention? The Gaunt Man inquired. The device on his left hand, the gauntlet, Nizu pointed out. From what I observed from the incident, his powers seemed to emanate from that gauntlet he wears. Now that he mentioned it, All Might did remember the metal glove on Midoriya's hand. You couldn't miss it. He also remembered how it would glow when he used whatever quirks he now had. Has there ever been a case of someone building a machine that replicates a quirk? Toshinori wondered. None that I can recall, Nizu pondered. Ever since the hero profession started, all technological research has been focused on the enhancement of quirks. That's how the support item industry was born. What if someone could build such a device? Then that person would become quite powerful, not just physically but socially too, Nizu explained. Imagine how the public will react when they find out it's possible to artificially replicate quirks. Dagoba Municipal Beach. A black misty warp gate opened up in the parking lot. Out of stepped the new leader of the league, Tamura Shigaraki, followed by Dabi and their transport Kurojairi. Is this the place? Dabi asked. This is where Miss Himiko said she was waiting for us, Kurojairi said. Shigaraki ignored them and marched towards the beach while they followed. Passing mountains of scrap metal, junk, abandoned cars and broken down appliances. They paused when they saw a rusted car frozen in midair covered in a blue aura. What the hell? Dabi raised a brow. There were more around them, locked into space, not just cars, but old fridges and dishwashers too. Look, Kurojairi pointed towards what looked like a pile of glass shards. Next thing they passed was a large pillar made entirely of ice, then a pyramid made of sand, and finally a big ball made of crushed junk packed together. What is all this? Shigaraki wondered, looking around for their wayward member. Over here. They all looked over to see Toga waving at them. She was sitting close to the water with her arms wrapped around her pulled-up knees with a dreamy look on her face. What's going on here? Tamura questioned her. He said he wanted to practice, Toga smiled. Who? The water off in the distance erupted like a geyser, shooting straight into the air. At the base of it stood a figure. That figure began moving towards them, walking on the very surface of the water until they could see that it was their former member Izuku Midoriya, aka Apotheosis. The boy strolled up to them, his vest and lab coat discarded, leaving him in just the black dress pants, shoes, and white shirt with the top few buttons undone, showing a bit of his solid pectorals. Tamura. Izuku called, waving hello. See. I told you we would meet again. You, Shigaraki scowled at him. He had seen what happened earlier that night on the television and finally started to put two and two together. So this is what you were up to. He eyed the gauntlet on the teen's arm. The robots, the strategies, the information, it was all just one big diversion so you could build this. Yeah, it was. You're so smart, Tamura, Izuku smiled despite the older villain figuring it all out. I confess I was secretly building my ultimate device for over a year now. I was sick of living in a world where I was looked down upon for being quirkless, so I created this. Brandishing his left arm, he showed them. The Infinity Gauntlet, a device that grants me the greatest quirks this world has ever seen. To prove his point, he waved the gauntlet at the water and the group stared in awe as the ocean was split in half like some sort of biblical event. That's so cool. Toga gushed. Are you strong enough to take on All Might? Tamura asked. That was and still is their goal after all. No, not yet, Izuku sighed in disappointment. I was able to catch him by surprise tonight, and he held back against me. Also, my gauntlet isn't complete. Why did you call us? Dabi finally spoke up. He missed talking to Izuku. He was one of the few that shared the same ideals as the hero killer Stain, but wasn't an annoying fanboy about it like Spinner. Do you wish rejoin the league? I borrowed Himiko and I just wanted to give her back. The green-haired teen looked to their hand-covered leader. But I would like to work with you all again if that's okay. We can start a mutual partnership. If you need assistance, call me and I'll help, but I expect the same thing in return. Does that sound like a good offer? Truthfully, he just wanted to borrow specific members of the league. It's a good offer, Tamura, Kurojairi spoke from over his master's shoulder. You've seen the power he now has. It does sound good, too good, Shigaraki glared at him. Yet you still haven't told me what you hope to accomplish with this master cheat code of yours. Izuku just grinned at him. My goal is simple. I wish to defeat All Might, not just simply kill. I want to expose him to the world. Show everyone the lies he told, then once his world has been torn down, I'll build a better one on top of it. Izuku looked out at the water towards the rising sun peeking over the horizon. That will be my revenge on All Might for giving me false hope in this wretched world and then snatching it away. Destroy his world and make a new one, Dabi summarized. I kind of like the sound of that. Alright, you have yourself a deal. Shigaraki finally agreed to a proper alliance. But don't ever try to manipulate me again. Are you still upset about that? I used you to accomplish my goals and you used me to accomplish your goals. That's how everything works, Izuku explained. I don't mind being used. Himiko shouted. Don't start with that again, Izuku sighed, running a hand through his messy hair, muttering about crazy fangirls. Please take her away, she tried to cut me 3 times already. Kurojiiri opened his warp gate and the League took their leave. Tamura Shigaraki glanced back at him one last time, noting how different Izuku was acting now that had power. Much more forward than the meek boy that used to work for him. When they were gone, Izuku went back to practicing with the Infinity Gauntlet. Then after an hour the package he was waiting for finally arrived. One of his handmade hover drones descended towards him. Part of the reason he toppled that building was not just to erase all evidence of his work and cover his retreat, but it was also to give this one single drone a window to escape with its cargo as it was programmed. Thank you. The drone's top opened up and out popped a vial containing a sample of blood. Izuku smiled as he held the small container filled with red liquid. Quirkless people like us can't be heroes. Isn't that right, All Might? He looked back out at the water. But I want to be something greater. The most powerful person in the world, who shapes it by his design. The gauntlet hummed with power. There's a word for that being. Using the reality stone he lifted up every piece of scrap and junk from the beach and levitated it out into the shore. Izuku quickly stacked it all together and began spelling out a word. Just 3 massive letters in the English alphabet, made from trash, and sitting in the water as a monument to his limitless power. God. In an old abandoned factory that had been converted into a secret base, Izuku sat in a chair staring at a large computer screen. His Infinity Gauntlet was raised up as he slowly clenched his fist. Behind him a car that he found close by, illegally parked next to a fire hydrant, was slowly being crushed and crumpled into a metal ball. This is problematic. He had spent the last 3 days training with the gauntlet and attempting to crack the secrets of this specific quirk. He had been making great progress with his invention. The DNA he acquired, not so much. No matter how many times he scanned the blood sample, the genetics still read as quirkless. Something was missing here. Something he failed to understand about this quirk. It seems, I need more data, Izuku said, tossing the crumpled car away. Going over to a nearby table he picked up a baggy gray hooded sweater and slipped it on over his black shirt, making sure to cover the gauntlet and hide his hair with the hood. Opening a portal, Izuku stepped through to go meet the one person who could provide him with the answers he needed. The station. I told you already, I didn't know he was up to something like this, the head of Geonosis's research and development said. He'd been interviewed by the police at the station for the past 2 hours about their rogue intern Izuku Midoriya. He never did anything suspicious or out of the ordinary. Detective Naomasa questioned. He was a brilliant boy dedicated to creating the best hero support devices, the man frowned. If a monster existed inside him, then he hid it very well. Thank you for your time, the officer sighed in disappointment, dismissing the man. It was the same with everyone he interviewed. They all had nothing but positive things to say about Midoriya and were honestly surprised that he was actually a villain. His phone rang before he could gather more of his thoughts. Seeing Toshinori's number he answered. How's the investigation going? The hero asked. Not well, Naomasa grimaced. Nobody had a clue about what Midoriya was or what he was secretly up to. Not the people at the company, his teachers, even his own mother didn't know. Did he have friends at that school? Toshinori wondered with hope. He must have had some. From what I was able to gather, the boy didn't have any, the detective sighed. We have no trail, and no leads as to what he will do next. It's been 4 days and he hasn't done anything yet. Toshinori was worried about what the boy was planning. He had overwhelming power now, so why isn't he using it? He'll have to show himself sooner or later, Naomasa said with determination. I have some good news though, he could hear the skinny man's enthusiasm. I think I found a successor to inherit my power. Really? Who is it? He's a 3rd year at Udade named Mirio, All Might said. That's good. Are you going to pass on one for all to him soon? Naomasa asked. Not yet, I need to correct a mistake first before I retire, Toshinori sighed sadly. Midoriya, right? The detective frowned, understanding that his friend needed to stop that boy as his last act of heroism. A master shouldn't leave their apprentice to clean up his own mess. He created the Izuku that exists now, so it was his job to bring him back. Good luck, my friend. Thanks, he said before ending the call. Udata classroom. Welcome back, Aizawa greeted his class from the floor while in his yellow sleeping bag. Classes had resumed after the provisional license exam. All of his students passed with the exception of Katsuki Bakugo. It turns out he wasn't the best at everything. Maybe failing for once would finally humble him, but Aizawa doubted it. The principal wants me to take this time to review certain villains we want you all to watch out for. The students snapped to attention at that. The League of Villains had targeted them in all their encounters with them. The projector screen was lowered, displaying the best-known pictures of the villains who were still at large. Aizawa named each of them, explained what little they knew about their quirks, and went through a bit of the police's personality profile on them. First up was Shigaraki, then Kurojiiri, and the other members of the League that escaped during the raid. Even Stain was up on the slideshow with barely any pictures as he was a very elusive killer. Finally they came to the last villain in the presentation. This is Izuku Midoriya, also known as Apotheosis. The screen showed a picture of a smiling, freckled face, dark green-haired boy. He looked just like a normal plain-looking innocent kid in this photo. You might recognize him as the biggest thing in the news right now, Aizawa said dryly. The next picture was a decent close-up of him from the incident 4 days ago. He definitely looked more like a villain now, with a dark gleam in his eyes and a menacing smirk on his face. He's actually quirkless. Momo Yaoyorozu raised her hand when their teacher said that. Has there ever been a quirkless villain before? She asked. Yes, but we just call them criminals, Aizawa explained. A villain is defined by the government as someone who breaks the law and uses their quirk or quirks to do it. Those who lack a quirk can't be classified as villains under normal circumstances, but as you may have observed from the footage of Midoriya, that isn't the case anymore. How can he possess a quirk now? Ida questioned. He wanted to more about this Izuku Midoriya. He couldn't find much about Apotheosis, but he did find some public information on his real identity. He was a smart young man that worked as an intern for one of the best support companies in the country. He even designed a new anti-villain robot, so what would make someone like that commit acts of evil yet still leave him good enough to save him from the hero killer? He still remembered every word of what Apotheosis told him that night. That's what we have yet to figure out, Aizawa scowled. They had a faculty meeting with other heroes recently discussing this very topic. Nobody had a clear understanding of what Midoriya had done to accomplish this. He claimed that he didn't get a quirk from All for One. Instead he built one in the form of that gauntlet on his hand, but how the hell was that even possible? All we know is that gauntlet he wears you see in the photo has something to do with it. Then just take it off of him. Katsuki Bakugo spat out. What's the issue here? He hated looking at the photo of Deku. Sure, he was shocked at first that the nerd who always wanted to be a hero switched to becoming a villain, but then he became angry. Just what the hell was that idiot doing? Though what infuriated even more was finding out that the nerd was the villain that fought him at the USJ and the same one that tricked him at the training camp. He still hadn't forgotten that bastard Apotheosis. Deku better hope that All Might or another hero takes him down, because if Bakugo got to him first he'd blow the nerd apart. I don't think it will be that simple, bro, Kirishima said to him. I doubt he'll just sit there and let somebody take it from him. Exactly, Aizawa was about to continue until he was interrupted again by another question. Does anybody know why he's doing this? Ochako asked aloud. What does that matter? Bakugo glared at her. He honestly didn't care what Deku hoped to accomplish with this farce. Well, there has to be a reason. One doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to become a villain, she argued. How do we know he wasn't driven to this by the abuse and bigotry of other people? Ochako returned his glare with an accusing one of her own. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The blonde snarled at her. Deciding not to dance around the issue, she just went with the blunt truth. You used to bully Midoriya, so you should know better than anyone. She knew all about Izuku and Katsuki's former relationship, her friend turned villain told her when they first met. Everyone's eyes widened as they turned to look at the blonde. Shut up, round face. Bakugo shouted, not liking how the whole class was staring at him. You don't know anything. His hands crackled with his rage. There you go again, more shouting and violence. Ochako kept her glare up. How can you be a hero when that's your default? It's because of people like you that he became a villain in the first place. Alright, that's enough. Aizawa interrupted before things got out of hand. Figuring out Midoriya's motivation isn't our job. That's for the psychologists to understand when the heroes capture him. All this bickering was starting to remind him of the meeting they already had about this. Flashback. Can someone please explain what the hell happened? Vlad King started. From what I was able to gather, Izuku Midoriya has built a device that grants himself multiple quirks, Nizu explained. Isn't that right, All Might? Yes, the hero said in his muscled form. He seemed to be able to control and move objects at will and even teleport. He looked to Endeavor and asked. What do you think? You're right about that, the flame-covered man reluctantly agreed with the number one hero. He lifted up a wave of water like it was nothing to counter my flames. Let's not forget he tossed around All Might easily enough, Aizawa reminded them. He wouldn't have if you didn't go easy on him. Endeavor glared at his rival. You held back on purpose, didn't you? Of course I held back. All Might shouted at him. Midoriya is just a boy. A misguided one, but a boy nonetheless. I want to help him, not beat him to a pulp. He could acknowledge that Izuku turning into a villain was his own fault. His own words of rejection are what caused him to descend into despair and travel down this dark path. So it was only right that the symbol of peace fix his mistake and save the kid from that path. That boy destroyed a building and injured dozens of people, or did you forget? Endeavor argued. Nobody was killed. I see that as a sign of there still being some good left in Midoriya, All Might defended the boy. Plus there was the incident where Izuku saved Ida from Stain, and he even protected that boy Kota by defeating the notorious villain Muscular. Can we back up for a second? Midnight spoke up. A device that grants him multiple quirks? How is that even possible? She asked. She has a point, Power Loader added. In the entire history of quirks, no one has ever been able to create a device that artificial grants quirks. If I wasn't so terrified that it's in the hands of a villain, I'd actually be impressed by the kid's genius. Does anybody have a single clue as to how he did this? Endeavor asked. All evidence has been erased along with that building. Young Midoriya covered his tracks well, All Might stated. The police found his school dorm room empty and his computer was wiped clean. What will he do next? Aizawa finally questioned. I don't know, the number one hero frowned. He figured the boy would want revenge on him, but he chose to flee instead. With the kind of power he now possessed, there was no telling what he would do next. End flashback. These are the villains you need to look out for, but remember these people are not the only ones out there, Aizawa finished, moving on to what today's training exercise was going to be. Bakugo scowled and stopped staring daggers at Ochako. Does nobody care about why he's doing this? Uraraka wondered. It seems acts of heroism nowadays consisted of just beating the bad guys up and not caring that the villains might have been good people at one time. Izuku was a nice boy, he wouldn't just do this for no reason. Though that didn't seem to matter to anyone. I hope he's okay wherever he is? Udata Development Studio. You're awfully quiet. Power Loader noticed his student wasn't as talkative as she normally was. Mei didn't say anything and continued to use the welder. Having enough of her silence, the teacher switched the machine off. Alright, what's wrong? With a sigh, Mei Hatsum took her goggles off and wiped her face clean. I knew him, she said quietly. Izuku Midoriya. Power Loader was already aware that she knew the villain before he revealed himself to the world. The police were too when they screened his known associates. You were friends with him. He didn't tell me anything about this, she said frankly. Before you ask. Hatsum, the teacher began. The other teachers and heroes believe that the Midoriya that you knew was just an act. The one we see now is the real one. What little evidence we have points to him having planned this for a long time. Why would be so nice to me? We shared ideas and theories with each other. Why would he do that? She argued. Why would he be friends with her? That was what she was really asking. You are a Udata student. Maybe he wanted to get information out of you? Power Loader explained. He never asked anything about Udata, Mei defended. Nothing classified anyway. What do you mean? The teacher questioned. He only asked me what it was like to be at a hero school, Mei said sadly. She remembered the desperate longing look on his face when he asked her. There was no way he faked that. A silent pause passed between them while Power Loader considered what she told him. You saw that bit of footage on the news, right? That glove he made. What do you think it is? Well, it looks to me like it grants him a powerful quirk. We know that already, but how do you think it works? Magic? Mei raised her eyebrow. I honestly don't know. You're going to have to ask Izuku. We'll do plenty of that when All Might catches him. I don't think it will be that easy, she thought to herself. There was something else that she wasn't sure she should bring up. Izuku once told her about a location he was interested in for materials. An old scrapyard that he mentioned once. May didn't think it was worth mentioning, it was probably nothing, but a nagging feeling kept telling her that it was important. Tartarus. Confined in his escape-proof cell, surrounded by impenetrable walls, turrets, and a sealed door, all for one sat bound to a chair. The only sound keeping him company was the respirator hooked up to his face, the one part of his body not tied down. His head cocked for a moment when he felt a few odd vibrations emanating from deep within the building. These vibrations didn't stop, which let the villain know that something interesting was happening in this prison. He didn't have to wonder about long, as it seemed that he had a guest. Well, this is a surprise. I didn't think that we'd ever meet again, All for One spoke. A portal opened up in the wall and out of it stepped what he liked to think of as his other protege. Izuku. Hello sensei, the boy smiled, pulling his gray hood down. You know, they really flatter you with this cell. At least they gave me a chair so I'm comfortable enough to serve my consecutive life sentences, he chuckled. I take it you're here to get me out then. Unfortunately I won't get far without these life support machines, unless of course you built another mask? It was Izuku's turn to chuckle. Get you out? The boy smirked. Why would I do that? Especially now that you're right where I need you to be. If All for One still had a face, his eyebrows would have raised in surprise and then realization. You planned this, the villain stated. Don't give me too much credit, sensei. Izuku paced around the cell. I didn't plan for this to happen. I merely made preparations and assumptions based off what I figured would most likely happen. He stopped pacing and faced his former boss. I knew that Tamura's plan to kidnap a Udata student would go south. If he succeeded, then I knew it would tick off the heroes and teachers. That they would zero in on the League and All Might himself would lead the charge. I also knew that with your apprentice in danger it would force you to come out of hiding to battle the hero. Izuku paused to let it all sink in. From there I expected two outcomes. 1. You defeat and kill All Might, but are so badly injured and weakened that you're taken down by another hero. Scenario 2. All Might defeats you and throws you in prison, but in turn weakens himself to the point where beating him will be easier for myself to accomplish. The green-haired teen grinned at him. Either way I get everything I need to complete my gauntlet and two threats to my plans are eliminated. All for One just stared at him with his featureless scarred face. The man then broke into a fit of giggles which devolved into full-blown laughter. Yes. Excellent. The villain laughed. Very good. Using every situation to your advantage. If my hands were free I'd applaud you. He started to calm down. So I take it you used the space stone to enter the prison. Piece of cake really. Izuku smirked at how simple it was. Once inside I released a couple of dangerous prisoners from their cells, but not too dangerous that they'd have to call a hero to put them back. Then I entered the control room and ran my phantom program to render me invisible to the cameras. I'd say we have a good few minutes to talk before the guards get everything back under control. The sensors, All for One pointed his head to the turrets located in every corner of his cell. Detect the usage of quirks. Izuku waved his gauntlet in front of where one of these sensors was located. I'm quirkless, remember? Not anymore. All for One couldn't help but notice the metal thing attached to the boy's left hand. So he actually did it. The boy did the impossible and created the Infinity Gauntlet. That's what I'm here for. I need more information and I would also like a small favor. The teen stepped closer to the bound villain. And right now you're not exactly in a position to refuse. Information about what? About All Might's quirk. Izuku took another step closer. I already told you about how it worked. What more do you need to know? All for One questioned. Tell me about his predecessors, specifically Nana Shimura. The boy leaned forward in eager anticipation. Now that's more like it. The defeated villain grinned widely. Eat this. All Might said, holding out a single strand of bright yellow hair. His hair to be exact. Excuse me? Mirio asked, eyeing the strand. To take in my power you need to take in a piece of my DNA, the hero explained. This is how One for All is passed on. I see. The third-year student seemed to understand how it worked. Why are you giving this to me now when you said that you were going to wait before? All Might sighed and returned to his skinny form in a puff of smoke. The truth is that I'm worried about the future, the hero said with concern in his voice. I want to pass the power on to a successor now in case something happens to me. I don't think you're going anywhere, All Might, Mirio said with enthusiasm. You're too strong and important to let anyone beat you. No one is invincible, Mirio. All Might frowned. I learned that lesson the hard way. He thought back to the last time he saw his master alive, before All for One killed her. I need to stop Midoriya. I have to try and make him see reason, to bring him back, but if I fail. You won't, the large blonde boy spoke proudly. You're the symbol of peace. I know you'll get through to that boy. All Might had told him about his relationship with Izuku Midoriya, in great detail. While Mirio Togata understood the hero's reason for telling a fan that he couldn't be a hero without a quirk, he didn't completely agree. The fact that his own quirk permeation wasn't powerful or practical for a hero until he made it that way was proof that a quirk wasn't everything to the profession. He honestly felt bad for this boy that society looked down upon for lacking a quirk. It couldn't have been an easy life, to be told by everyone, even the hero that you looked up to the most, to give up. Personally, he saw Midoriya as someone who had lost all hope and turned to the side of evil because he had nothing left. He still needed to be stopped before he went too far. When All Might caught him, Mirio wanted to get the chance to speak to Midoriya and maybe even help rehabilitate him. Just promise me that you will stop him should I fail. Toshinori held out the strand of hair again. I promise. Mirio gratefully took it. A choked gag later and he had successfully swallowed the hair. Good. It should take effect in the next few hours. All Might gave him a pat on the back. Nothing we can do now, but wait. While that was happening. Now Himiko, I can't stress enough how important this is to me, Izuku explained to the still grinning girl that obsessed over him. This machine is slowly processing a new stone for me. I need you to guard it with your life, and once it's finished you will call me immediately. You can count on me, Izuku-an. Togo smiled and saluted him. What's so important about this thing again? Dabi walked around the large round machine, examining it with open skepticism. My forge is a machine of my own design, Izuku told him. They are how I create the stones for this. He brandished the gauntlet, pointing at the stones. This particular version of the forge is right now processing what will be the most powerful of all the stones. The stone that will keep both the heroes and the villains in check. How so? Dabi asked. You'll have to wait and see, Izuku smiled, turning to Himiko. Remember, call me when it's done, and with that he activated the forge and let his machine begin to crafting the soul stone. Making a portal he stepped through, followed by Dabi. They were now back at the abandoned factory that Izuku originally brought them both to. I'm glad I chose you too when I asked Tamura if I could borrow a couple of his league members. Izuku walked around his makeshift lab. You two seem the most reliable. Dabi just stared at him. What is it you hope to accomplish? The patched-up man finally asked. Izuku stopped what he was doing and faced him. You said you wanted to eliminate the fake heroes just like Stain wants. Was that true? Of course, but unlike Stain I want to go a step further. The teen looked down at his gauntlet. I wish to create a society with real heroes. Ones that aren't just determined by how powerful their quirks are, but by their character too. He walked over to a large object covered by a white sheet. My Infinity Gauntlet is the key to seizing control of our world and making the new law of land. Do you really think it will be that easy? Dabi questioned. If there is one thing I've learned is that power is what rules everything. It was power that made All Might the symbol of peace, and it's power that will topple his reign, Izuku promised while removing the sheet, revealing another version of his forge machine. And when these next two stones are finished I'll have so much power that no one can stop me. He's obsessed, Dabi noted. But still, anything to put that bastard in his place. He thought about the hero that he hated more than anything. In Izuku's world that hero won't be allowed to exist, hence why he was here to support the freckled boy's plan. As crazy as it sounded, it could work. Here we go, Izuku smiled as he activated the machine with a push of a button. So which stone is this? The dark-haired villain asked. The Power Stone, he answered without taking his eyes off the forge. This one is also going to take a while to make. The DNA was rather stubborn, but I still cracked it open with a little time and data. He chuckled lightly at how simple it was after his talk with All for One. In the end it just needed a drop of somebody else's blood to make the quirk reveal itself. Who knew that he would be so useful? Elsewhere. Ochako slung her backpack over her shoulder, moving on to her next class. Thoughts of Izuku hadn't left her mind this whole week. There were just so many questions she wanted to know. Where was he? Why was he doing this? How long was he planning this? Was he really her friend? Why am I still thinking about him? That was the current question running through her head as she walked down the hallway. Psst! Ochako jumped when a voice caught her attention. Whipping around she spotted Mei Hatsum poking her head from around a corner, waving her over. Psst! What? Ochako walked up to her. Come with me. Mei grabbed the other girl's wrist and took off. Eventually, after a bunch of silence and dragging, they ended up in one of the girls' restrooms. "What's this about May? I think I know where Izuku might be hiding," she blurted out. Ochako's eyes widened and quickly looked around at the stalls to make sure they were alone. "You know where he is?" the brown-haired girl asked. "He mentioned this place a few times. A junkyard that he thought would be good for materials and a testing ground. I didn't think much of it at the time, but with him disappearing I figured Izuku would be hiding there since it's pretty remote," the support student explained. "Where is it?" "Raxus Junkyard. It's located outside the city," May told her. "I was wondering if you could go there. No heroes, no police. Just to check and see if he's there." "What if he is?" As much as Ochako wanted to see him again, he was still a powerful villain. "Can you just talk to him for me if he is there?" May pleaded. "Ask him why he's doing this. I'm sure you want to know yourself. And if possible, maybe you could even get him to consider stopping whatever he's planning." "Why can't you go?" the hero student asked out of curiosity. "Because they're watching me." Seeing the curious look, she decided to explain. "As one of Izuku's known associates, the police recently interrogated me about him. They probably suspect that I might be a spy, since he's allied with the League of Villains." "That's crazy." Ochako knew that May couldn't be a spy. "I know," Hatsum exclaimed. "I've never done anything. Sure, I blew up the workshop a few dozen times, but that doesn't make me bad." "Did you tell them that I knew Izuku?" the hero student questioned with a worried expression. That last thing her parents needed was their daughter brought in for questioning about possibly being in cahoots with a villain. "Actually no," May looked thoughtful for a moment. "Plus you got your provisional license, so you won't get in any serious trouble if anyone finds out." Ochako chewed on her bottom lip while she thought about it. On one hand, there was probably no sign of Izuku at the junkyard. On the other hand, if he was there, then it would be the perfect opportunity to ask him some questions, and maybe she could convince him to surrender peacefully. "All right, I'll go check the place out after class." She was suddenly swept up in a hug. "Thanks. I owe you for this one." May smiled while Uraraka awkwardly hugged her back. Together they made plans and looked up directions to the junkyard. Later. "Check," Izuku smirked as he moved his knight into a dangerous position for his opponent. "This isn't fair, you're too smart for chess," Dabi scowled at him. "Let's play something that's luck-based." He was interrupted by the sound of a small alarm. "That will be the door," Izuku chuckled as he stood up from the table. "They're here, let's get a move on." He knew that it was only a matter of time before the heroes found this little hideout. Luckily Izuku was prepared with an escape plan. "How are we going to move this thing?" Dabi looked at the forge, still busy processing the newest stone. "It's like he hasn't been paying attention." The younger of the two used his gauntlet to simply open a portal on the floor, lift the machine and gently send it through. "After you." Dabi nodded and jumped through the open portal, followed by Izuku. Outside. "So how do you want to do this?" The group of pro-heroes looked at each other as they stared at the abandoned factory. All Might said he wanted to go capture him alone, but he isn't here yet. Deciding to ignore the initial instructions, they headed inside building, intent on arresting the villain and getting all the glory for themselves. "Izuku Midoriya," one of them called out when they entered the main floor. Getting no response, he tried again. "Hello?" "He's not here." Another hero examined what looked like a workspace set up on the factory floor. Another noticed an oil stain and a set of indentions on the concrete. Something was recently moved from here. They continued to look around for clues as to where Midoriya could have went or what he was working on. "What's that?" Noticing a tall dark silhouette in the dimly lit side of the room, the hero cautiously approached it, only to pause when he saw a set of glowing red eyes flash on. Out of the darkness stepped a big chrome robot, another prototype for the Titan, with the number 4 printed on its chest plate. "Oh!" The robot growled and charged forward at the surprised group of heroes. Meanwhile, Izuku smiled as they drove off. It was a good thing he kept another of the Titan prototypes. "Always look before you leap." "I guess they don't teach that at hero school." Dabi was behind the wheel of a large armored bank truck that the green-haired villain recently commandeered. In the back of the truck the forge sat, still forming the next stone to be attached to the boy's gauntlet. "You want me to drive casual or aggressive?" the dark-haired man asked with a sarcastic smirk. His question was answered when a squad of police cars appeared in pursuit behind them. "Aggressive please." Izuku kept glancing back at his forge. It wouldn't be long now. Dabi successfully weaved around other cars, occasionally lobbing a blue fireball out the window to keep the police at bay. "This pursuit is getting annoying," Izuku commented with a frustrated sigh. "I'll be right back," he said before vanishing in a flash warp. "I hate when he does that," Dabi spoke to himself. Outside, Izuku reappeared on top of the moving armored truck. He was dressed in a black hooded long coat with slits in the sides for extra leg mobility, black pants, shin/knee guards, and armored boots. He walked to the edge, facing the pursuing cars. "Oh dear, this street appears to be in dire need of repairs." Waving the gauntlet around, he quickly tore the pavement apart. The cop cars were forced to hit the brakes, lest they crash into the shredded bits of the road. "Hang on, Dabi." Izuku pointed his gloved hand in the direction they were traveling, levitating the truck off the street and taking it through the air. Miles later, he set the car down in an alley, between two buildings. "I didn't think they'd be that hot on our trail," Izuku remarked as he opened the back of the truck up. 5 minutes until the stone was ready, by his estimation. "You're the kid with the plan," Dabi said, getting out of the vehicle. "What do we do now?" "Stall for time." "I need to get Dash." Izuku froze, feeling the air shift behind him. He spun around just in time to see the number one hero himself speeding towards him. Thinking on his feet, he held the gauntlet out, activated the space and reality stone to project his epidermal barrier outward. All Might's hand was blocked by a blue round barrier a mere yard away from his target. When the two met, it created a shockwave strong enough to push Dabi back. "Ha!" With a shout, Izuku forced All Might away, who skidded to a halt near the end of the alley. He would not be tossed around again so easily. "Midoriya." The hero stared the boy down. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Izuku smirked, pulling his hood down. "All Might. Come to put a stop to the big bad Izuku Midoriya," he said sarcastically. "This is as far as you go, boy." "Why?" The hero stood in a battle-ready pose, sporting his trademark smile. "Because I am here." Same old catchphrase. Izuku raised his Infinity Gauntlet in retaliation. "Same old All Might." The hero was blinded by bright red glow and then promptly blown back out of the alley. "Guard the machine, and bring me what comes out when it's done," he said without looking back at his accomplice. "I want out of here as soon as I do," Dabi told him. "I can help you fight almost anyone, but not the strongest hero in the world." "Understandable." Izuku nodded and walked out of the alley after his opponent. Walking out into the now evacuated city street, his green eyes zeroed in on the man who crushed his dreams over a year ago. "So how have you been? We didn't get a chance to properly talk last time we met." "You didn't exactly give me a chance to talk to you," Toshinori said, referring to the incident. "Sorry about that." Izuku almost sounded sincere. "I was caught up in the moment of finally obtaining superpowers." "Why are you doing this?" All Might finally asked the question that had been bothering him the most. "Didn't you want to be a hero? The boy I met said he wanted to save people with a smile?" Izuku frowned after hearing that. "The boy you met was naive. He was weak and foolish." He levitated off the ground as spoke. The old Izuku kept trying to reach for an impossible dream. "I'm the new Izuku. I'm better than him in every way." The gauntlet hummed with power as he pointed it at the hero. "That still doesn't answer my question," All Might pointed out. "You want to know why? Fine, I tell you." Still keeping the device on him, Izuku decided to explain himself. "The awful truth is you broke me, All Might. All my life everyone and everything chipped away at me, the doctors, the kids at school, the teachers, Bakugo, my own mother." He listed off all those who either put him down or didn't believe in him, like his mom. "But you, All Might, you were the hammer that shattered me into pieces." Every word was like a dagger of guilt stabbing Toshinori in the chest. "I had two options then. I could either stay a broken shell of person for the rest of my life, or I could rebuild myself and make sure what happens to me doesn't happen to anyone else again." The earth began to shake as he activated the stone's power. "I'll start by eliminating you, the fraud who lies to the world and gives them all false hope." The concrete at the hero's feet changed shape into a field of pointed spikes. All Might avoided it by jumping into the air and grabbing onto the side of nearby building. "I'm sorry, Midoriya," he shouted, hoping to reach the kid. "I truly am." "No, you're not." Izuku yelled back at him. "You're not sorry for what you said to me. You're sorry about the end result," he argued. "If I didn't become a villain, would you be here apologizing to me? Did you even once think about me again after our first meeting?" All Might looked away in shame. It was true, he didn't think about Midoriya until Naomasa brought him up as a potential suspect. "That's what I thought." Pointing the gauntlet at him, Izuku channeled air into the palm, creating a small vortex of wind. He then tossed it at the blonde hero. Retaliating, All Might punched the air, canceling out what looked like a miniature tornado. He leaped from the side of the building towards Midoriya, attempting to grab him out of the air. Izuku saw him coming and flash warped away in time. Once he was a good distance away, Izuku quickly thrust his gauntlet at All Might. Using the reality stone, he closed his fist. Chunks of concrete, cars, and pieces of the buildings rushed to the symbol of peace's location, trying to crush him. All Might merely clapped his hands hard and sent the debris flying away from him before landing safely back on the ground. Very good. As expected from the best of the best. Izuku applauded. You should stop before this gets out of hand, All Might told him. Izuku looked around the city from his position in the air. The area looked deserted. So the heroes must have evacuated the citizens. I see, you learned your lesson from your battle with All for 1 inch. With a smirk on his face, he brought his left thumb to his middle finger. That means I can cut loose a bit. With a single finger snap, the sides of every building around them were shattered, cars were blown away, and All Might had to shield himself with his arms lest he be swept up by the shockwave too. Damn. He's so powerful now. All Might looked around at the destruction that was caused by just a snap of the kid's fingers. Incredible, isn't? Izuku grinned down at him. Who would have thought that a quirkless person that you and the rest of society dismissed as worthless could generate such power? I never thought of you as worthless. All Might tried to reason with him again. I was wrong, all right. I think it's possible for you to be a hero. He was cut off when Izuku furiously yelled at him. You're lying. The teen glared darkly. Back then, on that roof, you told me the complete and honest truth. Powerless people like me can't make a difference in this world. His fists were tightly clenched as he spoke. Don't you dare insult or patronize me ever again. With a scream, Izuku ripped up every single fire hydrant in the city, manipulated the water that sprayed out, and aimed it at the hero that dared to still look down at him. I need to fight him at a distance, Izuku contemplated as All Might blew away the water with a single punch. Up close I still stand no chance. He manipulated the water again and sent it all back towards the man, this time freezing it into ice before it made contact. Once Dabi delivers the power stone, then it's check. The ice was shattered nearly instantaneously. And once Himiko calls me about the soul stone's completion, checkmate. He knew that all he needed to do was stall for time. He's fighting from a distance, All Might noticed. Which means, the hero vanished and reappeared in the air on Midoriya's right side. You're not good at close combat. With a simple palm smack, he sent a wide-eyed Izuku tumbling down a street. Oomph! The boy's back was slammed into the back of a car, stopping his path. Good thing the epidermal barrier, a passive ability of the space stone, protected him from any serious harm. Getting back to his feet, he shook his head clear. Okay, that hurt a bit. You can't beat me, Midoriya. All Might marched down the street towards him. You're right, I can't, Izuku smirked at him. Not with 3 stones at least. He spotted Dabi sneaking up with a spherical capsule in his hand. All Might noticed him too and attempted to grab him only to get blocked by a wall of blue fire. Catch! The black-haired villain threw the sphere at his comrade. The symbol of peace tried to snatch it out of the air, but a small portal opened and swallowed the capsule up. Panicking, he looked to Midoriya, who now held the metal container in his gauntlet-covered hand. Nice try, the boy smirked widely at him. But not quick enough. What is that? All Might worriedly glanced at something that was obviously important to the young man's plans. I like to think of it as poetic justice. Izuku opened the capsule, revealing a glowing emerald green stone inside. Thank you, Dabi, he said as picked it up with his right hand. Gently he took the stone and placed it in one of the empty slots on his Infinity Gauntlet, the one located on the back of the palm. The result was instantaneous. As soon as the stone bonded to the device, a torrent of power exploded out of Izuku. Gaha! The green-haired teen screamed as the energy surged through his body. A neon green vein-like pattern covered his skin. Even the ground beneath his feet cracked from the power surge. Wow! Izuku breathed a sigh of relief when the rush finally subsided and veins faded. What have you done now? All Might demanded. I've tipped the scales. Izuku grinned as he removed his hooded coat, revealing what he was wearing underneath. He was sporting a tight-fitting black sleeveless top that hugged the lean muscular frame that he worked hard to achieve this past year. His right arm was covered in a fingerless black glove made of the same material that stopped mid-bicep. He wore dark gray pants with black armored boots. All in all, Izuku looked dressed for combat. I'm warning you now, Midoriya, if you don't stop this madness and surrender, I'll have to use more of my strength against you. Izuku didn't respond to his threat and started walking towards his opponent. Don't say I didn't warn you. He rushed forward with his palm raised to deliver another open-palmed smack. Kansas. SMA-. He was cut off when Izuku's armored hand grabbed his incoming one, stopping the attack in its tracks. The wind kicked up around them from the sheer force of the collision. Dabi's eyes widened in shock that Izuku was able to stop the world's strongest hero. I'm sorry. I didn't quite catch that. Izuku grinned as green sparks began to dance along his body. Oh, were you about to say? His right fist rapidly shot forward. Smash! Crashing into All Might's chest and sending him flying down the street to slam into the side of a building. A cloud of dust was kicked up from the destruction, which immediately blown away by a simple hand gesture from the green-haired teen. What was that? The blonde hero coughed up blood as he pulled himself out of the crater in the wall that his impact made. That strength. It was almost the same as his own, but that's impossible. So many questions, so much confusion. Izuku winced in pain. It seems his right arm was broken in several places after that punch. Allow me to shed some light. Brandishing the device on his left hand, the young villain decided to explain. My greatest invention, the Infinity Gauntlet. A device that takes crystallized replications of quirks, harvested from DNA, and gives the wearer limitless access to those quirks. Each of these stones glowed brightly as he went on. The Space Stone, the Reality Stone, the Time Stone, and the latest addition, the Power Stone. Izuku smirked despite his arm still in agony. Or if you want, you can call it by its nickname. The One for All Stone. All Might paled when he named the stone. No. Realization hit him, the trademark smile replaced by a look of shock and horror. That's right. The power you used to become a pretend hero is now part of my gauntlet, the freckled boy laughed. Ironic, isn't it? He just continued to laugh at the look on All Might's face. Flashback. So how do we go about this? Aizawa asked as they stood in a small circle of three. The meeting was to discuss the plan of action to defeat and capture Izuku Midoriya. Classes had been cancelled because 2 teachers of U.A were getting involved. The logic the government used was that since Midoriya was just a kid, then the school staff was best suited since they deal with unruly kids all the time. Though it seemed the government was seriously underestimating Midoriya if you asked Aizawa. I'll go in fist, alone, All Might stated. You two help the other heroes evacuate the surrounding area and then get into position. Your arrogance is going to be your downfall one day. Aizawa glanced at him with irritation in his tired eyes. All Might had already confessed to them his relationship with Midoriya and his reason for wanting to finish this alone. I'll remove the gauntlet from him even if I have to knock him unconscious. He held up his fist in silent vow. Should things go awry, then you use your erasure quirk. We still don't know if it will work on him, the homeroom teacher argued. The boy was technically quirkless, so there was no telling if his eraser quirk could erase the gauntlet's power. Then the next course of action is my quirk, Midnight said. I'll put him to sleep and then we can strip him of the gauntlet. And what if that fails? Aizawa seemed to be the only one who didn't expect this to be easy, no matter which angle they go at it. Then I'll handle it. They turned to the new voice to see a short old man dressed in yellow. The retired hero Gran Torino. With my speed I can swoop in and yank the device right off that boy's hand, he promised. You'll need to stay hidden and make a move as soon as you see that Midoriya's guard is down, All Might told him. He had called his old mentor and the two of them met up yesterday. Of course, the first thing the old man did was smack Toshinori upside the head for crushing a fan's spirit and turning him into a villain. You forget yourself, boy, it was I that taught you, not the other way around, the old hero chuckled. All Might's phone went off, interrupting the meeting. When he saw his successor's name, he excused himself for a minute. Hello, young Mirio, he spoke. Something's wrong, All Might. What do you mean? I keep trying to activate One for All, but it isn't working. Not working? Now that was concerning. Yeah. It's been over 6 hours since you passed it on to me, but I don't feel any different. I even tried activating it and nothing happened. That's odd. All Might paused to think about what could be causing this problem. We'll have to figure it out later. I'm off to go bring in Midoriya, so I can't help right now. Should I just keep trying till you get back? Yes. Don't worry, Mirio, we'll figure this out together. Present time. Gah. Izuku looked down at his mangled and bruised right arm. Ah ha 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 ha. He laughed despite the pain he was in. So much power. Feels like jet fuel coursing through my veins. This can't be. All Might stared in shock from his position against the building he was punched into. Midoriya stood down the street, examining his newly acquired stone. How can he have One for All? So this is what it's like to be as strong as you, Izuku smirked in triumph. What have done? Toshinori demanded. Crystallized replications of quirks that I harvested from DNA, remember? Izuku explained again. It wasn't that hard to make you bleed, All Might. You're constantly spitting it out, he grinned darkly. The blond man's eyes widened further as he remembered the fight with that robot at Geonosis. Midoriya had it purposely targeted his weak spot, and make him puke up a bunch of his blood. That's impossible, my quirk is passed down, not hijacked by others. Izuku cut him off. Yes, I know all about your quirk. All for One told me everything. He flinched, feeling the broken bones in his arm shift. At first I couldn't find a single trace of a quirk in your genes, but when I added a sample of blood from a previous user, well, it suddenly came to life. Almost like it sensed a familiar person. All the past users of One for All are long dead, All Might argued. There's no way you could have got some. Nana Shimura, he said, making the hero pause. I know Sensei told you about her grandson Tamura Shigaraki. It was his blood that I added to awaken One for All and seal it in stone form. Izuku laughed at the speechless look on his opponent's face. Tell me, All Might, do you feel weaker? Toshinori was silent. It was true he could feel the power slowly draining from him, but he just assumed it was because he passed it on earlier this morning to Mirio. You can no longer pass this quirk on to a successor, because now it belongs to the Infinity Gauntlet. So that's why Mirio can't manifest it, the power of One for All, stolen by Izuku Midoriya. As much as the loss hurt him emotionally, Toshinori was equally terrified that the quirk was in the hands of a villain. However, he noted something that could afford him victory in stopping the boy. You can't even handle it properly, the hero referred to the damage he did to his own body. You nearly destroyed your right arm. Maybe if he could get Midoriya to see what he was doing to himself, he could convince him to stop and give the power back. Did I? Izuku lifted his Infinity Gauntlet and the yellow stone flashed for a moment. In the next moment a neon yellow shimmer covered the wounded limb, healing it almost instantly. Good as new. Seeing the confusion on the man's face, he explained himself once again. The Time Stone possesses a rather interesting ability called Restoration. Basically it allows me to restore my damaged body and undo any wounds. It however could not fix things like missing limbs and fatigue, but All Might didn't need to know that. Now I can fix myself over and over again until I master the Power Stone. You can't beat me, you fake. I've thought of everything. No. All Might clenched his fists. I won't allow this power to be abused and misused. Misused? Izuku cocked his head. Like how you misused the quirk to become a false hero celebrity who lies to the world? I never lied. Toshinori replied. Anyone can be a hero. Izuku smiled, doing an imitation of All Might's deep voice and laugh. Ha ha ha. All it takes is the drive and will. He chuckled at the irony of it all. Sadly, that's not the truth. According to the real you, all it takes is a powerful or useful quirk to be a hero, but if you went around preaching the truth you wouldn't be a celebrity loved the world over, basking in attention and glory. I don't tell the truth to protect them. From what? From upstaging you? Izuku glared at him. Do you have any idea how furious I was when All for One told me that you used to be quirkless? The audacity you possess is astounding, he spat. You who were once just like me, looking down on other quirkless people. The boy's eyes hardened into emerald steel. You taught me the truth of this world, All Might. That if a quirkless loser like you could accomplish so much, then why couldn't I do the same? Unlike you, however, I didn't have Nana Shimura around to take pity on me. He scowled furiously, looking down at the gauntlet on his hand. I had to make my own power. I poured all my hopes, dreams and desires into this. He stared at his reflection in the metal. I've come too far to be stopped now. I'll change this world for the better. No more relying on lies and false heroes like you, All Might. Only real heroes will be allowed to continue in my world. And what will you do to those that don't meet your standards? All Might asked. Izuku smiled in response. They will cease to exist, he answered. All will be made right. I'm sorry, Midoriya, the hero looked down in shame. I'm sorry I made you so twisted, but I promise you, he faced the boy. He turned into a mad, powerful villain with renewed confidence. I will bring you back, even if I have to knock some sense into you. Izuku's face frowned. Easier said than done, he grumbled, then his face lit back up into a smirk. Speaking of knocking things around. In theory, the Power Stone should also be able to amplify the strength and range of the other stones when combined. The green and red stones lit up as he said that. Let's test it out. Flattening his left hand, he made a rapid upward chopping motion. In seconds the entire street between the two of them was severed in half, going further until it cut the building All Might was up against right down the middle. How do you like that? Izuku laughed. If you're done showing off, Dabi approached, reminding him that he was still there. I'd like to leave now. Alright, if you don't want to stick around and enjoy the show, Izuku created a portal behind his ally. Say hello to Tamura for me. He waved Dabi off, who quickly escaped before things got out of hand. As much as he wanted to watch, he'd rather not be caught in the crossfire between two gods. Izuku closed the portal and simultaneously flashed warped away just before All Might could try to grab him once again. Missed. I'm warning you, Midoriya. All Might chased after him. I'll stop holding back if you don't surrender. Oh, please do, Izuku smirked at him. I really want to test the full capabilities of my Infinity Gauntlet, so give me your best. Beat me, crush me, and tear me apart. He used his thumbs to push his cheeks upwards and force the ends of his lips further up. Do it with a smile. He. Like the great hero you are. Meanwhile at Raxus Junkyard, Ochako approached the outer gate of the scrapyard. The sign looked worn and faded, as if nobody had been here in a long time. The girl came in her hero costume, with her new staff weapon attached to her back, just in case. Using her quirk, she floated herself over the old rusted gate. Looking around the vast wasteland of broken cars, boats, airplanes, appliances, and even some old robots, she spotted a large rundown building with smokestacks that was most likely used to melt down the junk in the past. If Izuku was hiding out here, then that would be the best place to start looking. Alright, let's take a look, she whispered to herself. Quietly she snuck around the piles of metal and scrap. Rather than use the door, Ochako floated up to one of the shattered windows to peek inside. She didn't see anybody at first until a noise caught her attention. Peering further into the abandoned building, she spotted some odd machine that looked out of place in the condemned facility. It also appeared to be running, going by the lights and drumming noise it was making. Descending to the ground, she quietly snuck inside, looking around for Izuku. Uraraka didn't see him anywhere, so she decided to investigate the machine. Before she could even examine it, Ochako suddenly felt a massive amount of bloodlust from behind. Acting on instinct, she leaped out of the way of a combat knife. Spinning around, she faced her attacker. As good as ever. Himiko Toga grinned widely. You. Ochako recognized her immediately. The girl that attacked her during the training camp. I don't believe we've been properly introduced, the girl giggled. I'm Himiko, Izuku's future girlfriend, and you're Ochako Uraraka. Her smile turned into a nasty frown. The girl that Izuku was so interested in. Where is he? Ochako demanded. So you can steal him from me? I don't think so. Toga pulled out a matching dagger for her other hand. Izuku said to guard the machine and to deal with intruders however I see fit. Her demonic grin returned. That's unfortunate for you. The hero student whipped out her staff and stood ready to fight. We'll see about that, Ochako glared at her. Back in the city, All Might stood staring up at cars and pieces of buildings that hovered around in the air. Midoriya was hiding in the floating debris. Every few seconds he would send a random object flying at the hero and then flash warp away to keep his position hidden. The truth was that Izuku had yet to fully figure out the Power Stone and was playing it a bit cautious now. Every time he tried to use it, his body would suffer damage. He easily fixed it with the Time Stone, but Izuku wanted to eventually be able to properly wield one for all. This is getting nowhere, All Might breathed a frustrated sigh. So be it. With amazing speed the hero leaped into the center of the floating field of debris. In an instant every last bit of it was blown away and All Might had Midoriya by his right arm. Using gravity and his super strength he yanked the boy back down to the ground. AHG. Izuku's back collided painfully with the pavement. With his right arm captured, All Might attempted to pull off the Infinity Gauntlet on the left. Thinking fast, Izuku bent his index finger and thumb, then flicked it towards him. Normally such a thing could only harm an insect, but the boy was using the Power Stone. The resulting flick was now strong enough to generate a force that blew All Might clean off of him. That seemed almost desperate, Toshinori said as he skidded to a halt. I could say the same about you, Izuku replied back as he restored his broken finger. He smirked at the hero as he stood back on his feet. Are you perhaps reaching the end of your time limit? Of course you remember that. All Might grumbled about smart kids and how they have to remember every detail. Well, I was your biggest fan at one time, Izuku reminded him. You know you still have a chance to be a hero, Toshinori told him. All you have to do is take off that gauntlet and surrender. You can put a stop to all this, Midoriya. In response Izuku chuckled, which slowly evolved into full-blown hysterical laughter. Take off my Infinity Gauntlet? The green-haired boy slowly walked towards the hero. And go back to being quirkless, useless Deku, cocking his right fist back while green sparks danced across his arm. Machs. Smash. With a single punch the buildings around them were demolished and the street they were fighting on was beyond recognition. Wow! Izuku looked down at his arm. It seemed the damage was worse than when he first used the Power Stone. So that's the difference between 30% and 60%. Quickly healing himself with the Time Stone, he turned to All Might with a pleased grin. The symbol of peace was looking a little ragged, with his costume torn in a few places and several cuts along his body. "You look like you're having fun," All Might panted, having taken the brunt of that last attack head-on. "Fun?" Izuku raised a brow at that. Fun isn't something one considers when trying to create a better world, Izuku smirked as he held up his gauntlet-covered fist. "But this does put a smile on my face. Look around you, Midoriya." The number one hero shouted at him. "Look at all this destruction you're causing. Do you really believe this will lead to a better world?" "I know it will." He decided to look around as well and noticed that he did wreck the city a bit too much. "And as for this mess, don't worry. Unlike you, I can pick up my toys," pointing the gauntlet into the air. The green Power Stone, the red Reality Stone and yellow Time Stone began to glow brightly together. Clenching his fist, he released a burst of yellow and red energy that covered the entire area. Slowly, little by little, the rubble and concrete began to move. Reconstruction becoming faster and faster. All Might watched in morbid fascination as the buildings and streets were rapidly put back together. In moments all the destruction caused by their battle was undone and the two of them stood in the middle of a city that was as good as new. "See? How? The Time Stone doesn't just repair my body." A trail of blood began dripping from Izuku's nose. "I can also use restoration to repair any damage done to non-organic objects as well, and if I combine it with the Power and Reality Stones, an entire city block is child's play." He wiped the blood and took a moment to examine it. Note to self, don't do something on that scale again without more practice. It seemed this power put a bit of strain on his body if he took it too far. For now at least. Now where were we? Izuku flash warped to get up close and personal with All Might with his right fist raised. The hero in turn shot his own fist forward to negate the boy's attack. Which it did and overpowered it, sending Midoriya flying back until his back slammed into the side of a truck. "That's more like it." Izuku wiped the saliva and blood from his chin before dashing forward through the air. Reaching out, he used the Reality Stone to rip some metal out of nearby building and fashioned it into a big sword which he attempted to stab into the number one hero. All Might grabbed the blade and shattered it in his powerful grip. With his other hand he once again tried to strike Midoriya, but a small portal opened up between them, allowing his arm to pass through. Izuku grinned and closed it, attempting to dismember him like he did to Muscular. All Might saw what he was about to do and yanked his limb out at the last second while simultaneously back-handing the kid away with his other. The green-haired teen tumbled across the pavement until he stopped short of the sidewalk. "You're actually starting to take me seriously," Izuku chuckled, getting up off the ground. He dusted his pants off with a pleased smile. "But is it too late? You lost a few centimeters of bulk there, All Might." He pointed out the man's slowly shrinking muscles. "Nothing gets past you, I see." All Might realized that he was right. He was fast approaching his limit. Every time he tried to force himself to just end the fight, Toshinori was reminded of his guilt and the fact that he was fighting a boy the same age as his students, which caused him to subconsciously pull his punches. Now that he was almost out of time, he would have to go all out even if it was just for a moment. "I've studied heroes for years. I know their quirks, techniques, strategies and patterns." Izuku pointed at him. "There's nothing you can do to stop me. I've planned this all out too well." All Might sighed in resignation. It seems that any attempts at talking Izuku into quitting was pointless. "Forgive me for this, Midoriya." Wadash, before he could even blink, All Might was in front of him. Izuku lashed out with the Reality Stone, but the hero overpowered its telekinetic force and grabbed his right arm. Pulling Midoriya over his shoulder, he turned and used his opposite hand to deliver a hard, decisive blow to the kid's head that nearly shattered the ground beneath them. Steam covered his rapidly shrinking body as he still held the boy's now unconscious body up by his arm. With the fight over, Toshinori finally released the breath he was holding. Was that it? His eyes widened as the young villain spoke. No. That's not nearly good enough." Izuku uppercut the man, forcing him to let go of his arm. "Well, it looks like you've used up all your power, All Might." The hero had now completely lost all of his strength, returning to his skinny, emaciated form. "Unfortunately for you, I am not bound by such limitations." He was interrupted by the sound of the news helicopter getting closer. "Ah. I was wondering when they would get brave enough for a closer look." "You knew they were here?" Toshinori looked at him to the helicopter anxiously. Of course. Who do you think gave them an anonymous tip that All Might would be fighting a villain in the city? Everything was going according to Izuku's design. With One for All successfully stolen, all Izuku needed to do was find out when the hero's strength would run out. Judging by the familiar sight of the shriveled man, it looks like he found it. Don't you think it's time all your adoring fans get a good look at the real you? Toshinori froze. You wouldn't? Izuku just smirked at him. I'll be right back. A human-sized portal opened behind him which he stepped back into. Inside the helicopter. It seems the demolished buildings have miraculously repaired themselves, the reporter noted, keeping the camera on the fight. Look. The pilot pointed down to the battle. The villain that All Might is fighting appears to have vanished. A flash of blue appeared in the back of copter. They glanced back in surprise to see Izuku Midoriya sitting in the back seat. Hi, he grabbed 3 of the spare cameras. I'm borrowing these, Izuku said before flash warping away. Back to the fight. Miss me? Izuku reappeared this time carrying 3 video cameras. Using the gauntlet he levitated these devices around him. Don't do this. All Might looked ashamed at what he knew was coming. Hello everyone. Izuku waved to one of the cameras, ignoring the man's plea. My name is Izuku Midoriya and this, he pointed to the cameras at the hero, is All Might. The real All Might, he smirked darkly at the hero. That's right people. This skinny matchstick man is actually the greatest hero in the world. This is your symbol of peace. Izuku was enjoying this greatly. The ultimate revenge on All Might wasn't to kill him. No, that would be too simple, too easy. The best way to get back at him was to expose him to the world and bring all of his lies out in the open. Did you know that All Might and I have something in common? Don't. Toshinori realized what he was about to reveal. He and I are both quirkless. Izuku exclaimed. This whole time he was borrowing a quirk that never belonged to him. However, his body has grown too weak to fully use it. The villain he fought in Kamino Ward should have retired him, but he still clings to his title and power like an old dying king clings to his throne. He paused, floating the cameras around to get a better view of the gaunt man. I ask you, all of you that are quirkless or have an impractical quirk. Is this your pillar of justice? Do you accept this fraud, this lie as your symbol of peace? All Might looked down in shame and humiliation while Izuku just smirked in glee. Everything that he spent years hiding and covering up so that the people could have someone to look up to with hope was now out in the open. Revealed by a boy whose hope he had destroyed. Still though. Well then, All Might. Do you have anything to say for yourself? The cameras got in closer. Anything to say for your lies and deceit? The hero stood there silent for a moment, then mumbled something. Speak up, your people can't hear. I said. Toshinori was able to muster up the last remaining bits of his strength to bulk himself back up. Everything is going to be all right. He wouldn't go down in shame like this. At the very least he would stop this threat before he retired and faced the world and its judgment. Izuku frowned, seeing the man's renewed smile and confidence despite being exposed. A liar to the very end, huh? Midoriya crushed the cameras with a flick of his wrist. He pointed the gauntlet at the hero. I'm so disappointed in you. Just as he was about to give him a full blast of the reality and power stone, carbon fiber bandages wrapped around his device and yanked him back down to earth. That's quite enough. Shoyuta Aizawa glared at the boy with his erasure quirk active, keeping a tight grip on his capture weapon. What? Izuku cried out as all his power seemingly vanished. That was easier than I thought it'd be. Aizawa kept his eyes locked on Midoriya as he sent more of his scarf out to trap him. Just kidding. Hawa. Izuku stood back up and fired telekinetic blast at the underground hero that threw him off his feet. Luckily All Might caught him before he crashed through a building. Yeah, not to brag, but your quirk erasure has no effect on someone like me who doesn't possess an ounce of any kind of quirk in their genetics. He ran his hand through his messy head of dark green hair. Nice try though, he applauded them for at least attempting it. Before he could gloat anymore, his right arm was ensnared by a whip. Hey cutie, Midnight tried to yank him off his feet. Mind falling asleep for me? She attempted to use her quirk to knock him out with her mist. Izuku just grinned manically at her. Sorry, but I'm not into older women, simply flicking his fingers with a minuscule amount of One for All, enough to blow her mist away, then grabbing her whip he threw Midnight down the street. Turning back to All Might and Aizawa, he pointed his gauntlet at them. The building surface behind them crumbled apart, the debris taking the shape of a giant hand that enclosed around them. Keeping a hold of Erasure Head, All Might dodged out of the way and landed safely next to a recovered Midnight. Sadly, it cost him the last bit of his strength that he had managed to squeeze out a moment ago. He sure doesn't play around, does he? Midnight remarked. Plan D then? Aizawa said as Toshinori deflated back into his skinny form again. Is he in position? The symbol of peace coughed. I'm afraid I won't be much help for the rest of this fight. What are you three scheming over there? Izuku called. The boy smirked as he levitated himself back into the air. Not going to say huh? That's fine, I'll come to you. Flashing warping to their location, Izuku appeared directly above them with his fist raised. Run, he said while bringing his arm down, creating a giant shockwave that shook the city. Raxus Junkyard. Hiya. Ochako managed to slam Himiko in the face with her staff, knocking her away. This isn't fair, Toga glared at her while wiping the blood from her mouth. I'm the one who's supposed to make you bleed. She jumped back to her feet and ran at the student with her knife poised to strike. Ochako used every ounce of her training to avoid getting stabbed. She hadn't practiced enough with the new staff weapon that Hatsum made from Izuku's design, but it seemed to work well with her quirk and fighting style. I need to end this quick. The girl used the grapple claw feature to grab a nearby crate that she made float earlier. It was weightless now, so she could easily pull it towards her and swing it around like a flail. Toga was forced to dodge and take several steps back. Flipping over the staff, she managed to get directly behind Uraraka with her blade in striking distance of her neck. Ochako had no time to dodge or block and closed her eyes, expecting the worst. The knife never stabbed her. Instead, a wave of ice appeared out of nowhere and completely froze the psychopathic girl in a small glacier of ice. We made it in time, a calm male voice spoke. Uraraka spun around, recognizing the voice of the person who saved her. There at the entrance of the facility stood her fellow classmates Shoto Todoroki, Momo Yaoyorozu, Eijiro Kirishima, Tenya Ida, and Tsuyu Azui. All of them fully dressed in their hero gear. Hey, what did we miss? Kirishima asked with a toothy smirk. What are you guys doing here? Ochako looked nervous at being caught like this. We could ask you the same question. Ida gave her a disapproving stare. I saw you sneaking out of the dorm in your costume, Momo revealed. So I asked them to help me follow you. Ochako had the decency to look ashamed. Mind explaining yourself here? I wanted to find Izuku Midoriya, she flushed in embarrassment. I needed to speak with him. You're not still in love with him, are you? Tsuyu blurted out. No. Of course not. She denied a little too quickly while her face turned even redder. I just had some questions and I wanted to see if I could talk him out of whatever he's planning. If you knew where he was hiding, then you should have told the teachers, Todoroki chastised, but before they could continue speaking, the machine behind them roared loudly as it exploded from the inside. When the sparks died down, a spherical metal capsule was ejected out. It landed near Momo, who gave it a curious look as she picked it up. Seeing that it could be opened, she slowly turned it, revealing what was inside. A small black stone with a purple glow surrounding it. What is this? She wondered, glancing between everyone. I don't know, but I think I know somebody that might have an idea. Ochako looked at the icy block that held Himiko. Katsuki Bakugu stared at the television screen in shock. The news had been reporting live on the scene for the past hour. All Might had been fighting a villain, not just any villain. That nerdy bastard Deku was throwing down with the #1 hero and somehow holding his own. Something Bakugu couldn't accomplish, back when he failed to beat All Might in the battle examen with his partner Kirishima. Even with that fancy gauntlet of his, he didn't think Deku would stand a chance against the greatest hero in the world. That bastard, he clenched his fists in anger. His anger grew until he froze when he saw All Might shrink down to a skinny, frail-looking man. Bakugu watched as Deku stole some cameras and went on a rant, revealing the truth about the hero to the world. That's right, people. This skinny matchstick man is actually the greatest hero in the world. This is your symbol of peace. What the hell was going on here? Why did All Might look so weak? Why wasn't he winning against Deku? But more importantly, how did Deku know about this weakened form? Did you know that All Might and I have something in common? He and I are both quirkless. This whole time he was borrowing a quirk that never belonged to him. However, his body has grown too weak to fully use it. The villain he fought in Kamino Ward should have retired him, but he still clings to his title and power like an old dying king clings to his throne. I ask you, all of you that are quirkless or have an impractical quirk, is this your pillar of justice? Do you accept this fraud, this lie as your symbol of peace? Is this my fault? Katsuki remembered the fight between All Might and that freak in the mask. Some of his classmates gave him an escape route, so he didn't get to witness the whole fight. All he knew was that something major went down and All Might was pushed harder than ever. If what Deku said was true, that the strongest hero was getting weaker, then it was probably his fault for getting captured by those villains. Katsuki didn't want to feel guilty, but no matter how he looked at it, if he was stronger they wouldn't have taken him so easily. That bastard Apotheosis, who he now knew was actually Deku, made him look so pathetic. None of this made any sense. Deku was strong and Katsuki was weak. How did everything end up so backwards? Before he could think more on this, Bakugo's phone buzzed in his pocket. Looking at, he spotted Kirishima's name with a message attached. After reading, Katsuki felt a new determination. Maybe there was a way he could correct this. The city. This just keeps getting worse, Aizawa lamented. Currently they were dodging a big long serpentine dragon made of concrete, bits of metal and shards of glass. Midoriya had crafted it out of pieces of the buildings around him and was controlling it like a puppet. Tell me about it. Toshinori ducked behind a turned-over car. With his strength faded, he couldn't even fight back and was forced on the defensive. We need to get him on the ground and fight him up close, Aizawa stated. Midoriya kept them at bay from a distance. If they were going to create an opening for Gran Torino to make a grab for the gauntlet, then they needed to get the boy into a better position. That's suicide. Toshinori already explained Midoriya's new power stone and the quirk it granted him, as well as what he learned about the other stones. That super strength damages his body, right? Eraserhead reminded them. In the time between the damaging and healing himself, we might be able to beat him. Any ideas on how we can do that? Midnight asked as she jumped behind the same car they were hiding behind after failing to take on Izuku. Come out wherever you are. Midoriya called, losing sight of his opponents. He hovered a bit higher in the air, looking around at all the destruction to see if he could spot them. Noticing a head of blonde hair, he smirked. Got you. With a shout, he sent his dragon made from building debris crashing head first into their location. Look out! Toshinori saw the attack coming and warned his fellow teachers just in the nick of time. Izuku hovered over to impact spot and blew the dust cloud away with a flick of his wrist. Running scared All Might. Izuku chuckled seeing that they escaped. How very heroic, he said sarcastically. A hero must be willing to put his life on the line. He taunted while throwing the man's own words back at him. You're nothing without your power. Nothing. Seeing that wasn't enough to draw him out, Izuku landed gently on the ground to look for them. Using the gauntlet, he started lifting up cars and tossing them aside. When will you get it through your head, All Might? You are what's wrong with the world. Walking over to a broken empty bus, he activated the power stone and kicked it out of his way. You set an impossible standard that no one can reach, not even you. Healing his broken leg, he continued. You're not even real. Yet you look down on the weak and won't even give us a chance to be strong. Lifting up more rubble with the reality stone, Izuku frowned when he didn't spot his target anywhere. He considered demolishing the buildings around him again with a finger snap, but he would rather avoid another display of power on that scale. All Might, Izuku called. Face me. Glancing around, he scowled in disappointment. Inside the bottom floor of a nearby building, All Might, Eraserhead and Midnight were currently hidden away. It's me he wants. Toshinori stood up and was about to head out there, but was stopped by Aizawa's scarf wrapping around his wrist. Are you just going to let him kill you? The dark-haired man asked, pulling him back. What good will that do? I don't think he wants to kill me. The skinny blonde man looked away. Midoriya wants to see me beaten and humiliated. Maybe when he finally gets what he wants he'll be satisfied and stop. And how will that look to the world? The great All Might, the symbol of peace, gives up. Aizawa glared at him. Is that how you want to go out? No. No, it wasn't how Yagi would leave this world of heroes and villains. Then what do you suggest? He's too powerful to stop with force. We still have Plan D. Aizawa brushed his hair to the side, revealing a communicator attached to his ear. Pressing it, he made contact with the fourth hero involved with this operation. All Might. Outside, Izuku once again yelled for the hero to come face him. He was starting to wonder if he'd done enough. Izuku already exposed the #1 hero for the fraud that he was. That was pretty much victory for him. He considered leaving for the junkyard where his soul stone should be just about finished. Before he could come to a decision, the man in question appeared, standing in the middle of the street. You want me? Here I am. Toshinori faced the young villain. It's about time. Izuku walked towards him. So All Might, ready to face your ultimate defeat? It will be a hollow victory for you. The man gestured to his true body. It doesn't matter. I've won. Izuku smirked, holding his arms out. No matter how you look at it, it's my victory. So much planning and research, just to get to this point right here where I reveal to the world the truth about you. He chuckled as kept a close eye on the hero for any attempts at trickery. Society will now lose all hope and faith not just in you, but all heroes. Was that your plan? To crush everybody's hopes just because I crushed yours? Toshinori couldn't believe the boy was that petty. Then again, he met villains with far more childish motivations. Don't worry, I'll give them their hope back to them when I create a new hero-based society. I'm not a monster, he frowned, seeing that Toshinori wasn't understanding the bigger picture. Just leave. You have one for all and those other stones, you got what you wanted, so just stop, the gaunt man tried to plead with the kid again. Not until I prove something. He pointed his device at the man. I have to know for sure. Know what? The weakened hero asked. I need to know if quirks are really as great as everyone makes them out to be. Izuku's gaze turned sad for a brief moment. I need to know if I could have been a hero without one. He wanted to know if everyone was wrong about him. If he could beat the best, then they were wrong. He wouldn't be so useless after all. I'm sorry, Toshinori apologized again for what he said to the boy all those months ago. Oh, will you stop saying that? Izuku shouted while lifting the gauntlet high into the air in an attempt to bring a large amount power crashing down on the hero. However, as soon as he raised it up, All Might made a quick hand sign behind his back. Aizawa, who was watching closely, recognized the signal and spoke into the communicator. Now! As soon as the word left his mouth, Gran Torino dashed out of his hiding spot like a jet. Flying as fast as he could, coming up behind Midoriya with his hand ready to grab the gauntlet and yank it right off. Out of the corner of his eye, Izuku could see the old man approaching in the reflection of his metallic device. Everything slowed down for him as his brain went into overdrive. He couldn't turn and retaliate, that would still leave him open, but there was one thing he could do. In an instant, Izuku activated the time stone and the entire area was encased in a yellow bubble and everything inside except the caster of it was frozen in time. You! Izuku turned around to land furious green eyes on the old retired hero an inch away from touching his Infinity Gauntlet. Sneaky old man. While time was still frozen for a few seconds, he used a small portion of the power stone to chop the small man in the stomach. Time resumed as the bubble dispersed. Guh! Gran Torino gasped in pain as the force of the blow caught up with him. Izuku flash warped behind and grabbed him by his cape, holding him up in the air. You may be fast, old man, but as long as I can stop time, it doesn't matter how fast you are, Izuku chuckled. What just happened? Aizawa and Midnight were confused. A flash of yellow and then Gran Torino was doubled over in pain when he was about to secure victory for them. It's just like before. All Might remembered something similar happening during the event where Midoriya revealed himself along with his weapon. Since you're all a bit slow on the upkeep, I'll explain it. Brandishing the gauntlet, he gestured to the yellow stone below his wrist. The time stone lets me stop time in an isolated area. I was saving it for an emergency, mainly because of the cooldown prevented him from using it again for a while. So congratulations on forcing me to use it. Using a small portion of the power stone, he shucked Gran Torino at All Might. He may be fast, but as long as I can stop time, it doesn't matter how fast he is. Whoa! Toshinori caught his former mentor, but the collision caused him to slide back a bit. Let's see. Izuku levitated himself off the ground again. First obviously was All Might's attempt to beat me down and forcefully take my Infinity Gauntlet. He rubbed his chin as he went off on a tangent. Next was to get Eraserhead to disable me and Midnight to render me unconscious. His mouth continued to mumble through the failed attempts to defeat. I'll assume your last-ditch effort was the old man and his speed. Now my question to you. Izuku pointed his gauntlet-covered fist at them. What else do you got? Raxus Junkyard. So these stones power his gauntlet? Momo began holding the black-purple glowing gem in her hand. And he needs this last one to complete it, is that right? Toga growled at them. And he'll be coming here soon to get it? Todoroki only unfroze her head so they could interrogate her. At first she refused to talk, but they were able to trick her into revealing a bit of vital information by using her infatuation with Izuku Midoriya against her. The psychotic girl ended up blurting out a few secrets that she wasn't supposed to tell anyone. He calls this one the Soul Stone apparently, Tenya remarked. What does it do? How should I know? Toga bit her lip as she glared at him. That was true. Izuku didn't tell her what it did, just that it was extremely important. I think we're missing the important thing here, guys. Kirishima started as he quietly put his phone away without them noticing. We have this stone and Midoriya doesn't know we have it. He's right, let's take it. The authorities, Momo nodded. Even if they can't figure out what it does, they might be able to keep it out of his hands. Or, hear me out, Kirishima trailed off. What if we used it against him? Has he gone crazy? Tsuyu bluntly asked. Use how? Momo questioned him. You're not seriously considering this? Tenya exclaimed. If this stone is the strongest, maybe its power can trump the others and defeat Midoriya when he arrives, Todoroki spoke up. Is that what you're getting at? I can't believe I'm hearing this. Tenya looked over to Ochako, who was staring off into space in thought. What about you, Uraraka? I think, she turned to face them. We should stay here and stop him. Truthfully, she still wanted the chance to speak to Izuku. Now that she had backup with her, if things went south they could defeat him together. From what I've seen, this Izuku Midoriya has been one step ahead of the heroes, but now we're ahead of him, Momo said confidently while looking at the stone in her hand. We can catch him off guard. Todoroki also seemed on board with this plan. That's the spirit. Kirishima smiled. Who else is in? I think this is a bad idea, but a worse idea would be ditching you to fight him by yourselves. Tsuyu reluctantly agreed to stay and help. As much as she didn't like it, the more numbers they had against Midoriya the better. The only one left to convince was the class rep Ida. They all turned to look at him expectantly, as if waiting for his side of the argument. This is crazy, Tenya glared at them before his eyes softened. But I've done crazier things myself, like going after the hero killer alone. Now that everyone was on board, they went outside and started coming up with plans and ideas to combat Midoriya when he arrived. Hey! Himiko was left frozen from the neck down. The group ignored her and left the girl there till they decided what to do with her later. Back to the city. Swirling above the center of the wrecked street, a large cloud of glass shards and dust churned and twisted about. Izuku floated in the center of it all, controlling the vortex by moving his arms around like a conductor leading a symphony. How are we supposed to get to him? Aizawa shouted as he dodged a tendril of broken glass that whipped out from cloud. I have an idea. Toshinori called as he ducked. Get him on the ground in an open spot, I'll handle the rest. He still had some of one for all left inside him. All had to do was activate it at the right time and deal a decisive blow. Unfortunately, Midoriya was smart enough to fight them from a distance. His skills and powers with the gauntlet were growing every minute. Here and now was the only chance they had to stop him before it was too late. I'm going in. Gran Torino charged the vortex of glass and dust. Izuku just smirked seeing him coming and launched waves of shards at the old hero. The man swiftly dodged each attack until he made it to the center, where he attempted to kick the boy in the head. Nice try. Izuku blocked his foot with his gauntlet and blasted Torino backwards, but was unprepared when Erasure Head Scarf and Midnight's Whip both wrapped around his legs while he was distracted and started yanking him towards the ground. 1, 2, 3, pull. They both began dragging him down with all their strength. The green-haired teen was momentarily caught off guard by their tenacity and gasped as his back hit the ground, knocking the wind out of him. All right, that's it. Izuku jumped back to his feet and was promptly kicked off them by Gran Torino. It seemed they were keeping the pressure on and not giving Midoriya a chance to retaliate. Enough. Using the reality stone, he blew everything around him away, forcing the heroes back. I'm ending this now. Pointing his gauntlet-covered fist at the three heroes. Hold the phone, there were supposed to be 4. Where's All Might? Realization dawned when he felt a presence directly behind him. Izuku spun around to blast the hero with his device. As soon as he turned, a large muscled hand gripped the gauntlet by the wrist. All Might held tight, having only this one chance while his strength briefly returned. I'm sorry, Midoriya. Cocking his other arm back, he prepared to end this in one blow. Texas. Smash. Izuku's eyes widened, seeing the first coming right at him. The time stone wouldn't help him here. While someone was touching him, they would be immune to the time freezing quirk. The punch connected, sending Midoriya crashing through the street, kicking up chunks of rubble as his spinning body skipped across the ground. An explosion of dust and debris erupted where he landed, defeated and most likely broken. Silence permeated the air as everyone held their breath, expecting the young villain to get back up. When he didn't, they all sighed in relief. That seemed a bit overkill, Aizawa stated. Villain or not, Izuku Midoriya was still just a kid. Toshinori was breathing heavily as he shrunk back into his gaunt form. At least it's over, Gran Torino said as he went to find where the kid crash landed. He didn't find him, but he saw the gauntlet sticking out of a pile of rubble. It must have got knocked off the boy's hand from the force of that blow. Walking towards it, the old man reached over to retrieve the weapon, but paused when he noticed something. The fingers were slowly moving. The metal hand clenched its grip as the red stone glowed with an ominous light. The pile of rubble was then levitated into the air, revealing Izuku, who laid in a crater bleeding and bruised. Ugh! Izuku grimaced as he tossed the debris that once covered him away. Blood dripped down his face as he stood on shaky legs. Impossible. Gran Torino was shocked that this kid could take a punch from Yagi and still remain conscious. Toshinori was also surprised as he watched Midoriya struggle to stand. His black sleeveless top was now torn and covered with holes. Gah! Izuku gasped in pain as he took stock of all his injuries that single punch did to him. Even with his epidermal barrier cranked up with the power stone at the last second, he still took some serious damage. A broken leg, arm, fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs and a concussion. Using the time stone he began healing himself. That really hurt All Might. His injuries were quickly fixed, but the patches of dirt and dried blood remained. But unfortunately for you it wasn't enough. All the stones on his gauntlet began glowing as he held his fingers together. The heroes froze in their movements knowing that he was preparing for another one of those devastating finger snaps. Do you know why you failed today, All Might? Because deep down you still won't take me seriously. Toshinori was about to argue but Izuku cut him off. Had you put your all into that punch then I wouldn't have been able to get back up. Do you have any idea how insulting that is to me? Izuku glared at him. In an instant he flash-warped past Gran Torino and appeared before a startled All Might. With his right hand he reached and punched him hard, but without the strength of the Power Stone, right in his weak spot. Toshinori doubled over, vomiting up more of his blood. I think I've seen enough. Not only that, but according to his estimate Himiko should have contacted him by now. Something must have happened with her, or she probably forgot. Either way Izuku needed to get to the junkyard. I hope to see some of you in the new world. Farewell. A portal opened behind him that he stepped back into, leaving the heroes. Did we just lose? Aizawa asked as Toshinori collapsed to his knees in a coughing fit behind them. In more ways than one, Gran Torino said sadly. I think it's much worse than we imagine. Toshinori finally spoke after he stopped coughing. He thought back to what Midoriya said and he realized that the boy was right. Some part of him must have subconsciously held back when he punched. It was the kid's eyes. They were wide and scared for a moment. It reminded Toshinori of when he first met Izuku. When he nervously asked him if he could be a hero without a quirk. That memory appeared and he withheld some of his power in that brief instant. I really am sorry. He allowed a single tear to drop for the old Midoriya that he was starting to think was long gone. Izuku stared at the destroyed forge that created his final stone. He then turned around and looked to Himiko, who stood frozen in ice up to her neck. It didn't take a genius to understand what happened here. Hi, she blushed in embarrassment. Where's the soul stone? He had a pretty good idea, but he wanted her to say it. Keep it simple please. Okay, first that gravity girl showed up, then her friend showed up, then they took the stone and well here we are, she chuckled nervously. Please don't be mad. Why would I be mad? Izuku smiled pleasantly despite the unfortunate situation he found himself in. I don't blame you. I blame myself, he sighed. I didn't think anyone would discover this place, let alone a bunch of you students, but how did you Raraka find out about? No matter, they won't get far. If you get me out of this ice I can help you get your stone back. Toga fluttered her eyes at him. Itsukun. No, I think you've done enough. Izuku dismissed her and opened a portal behind her. Wait. I'm still frozen. Himiko reminded him. Ask Dabi to thaw you out. The green-haired teen gently pushed her through and closed it. He then opened another portal that would take him outside the old abandoned smelting plant to the junkyard. Once he was out he started walking around. I wonder how far they got. Izuku kept walking until he walked right past Shoto Todoroki sitting on an old car. He paused and took a few steps back, then slowly turned his head to face the student who sat there nonchalantly. Izuku Midoriya. You're a bit shorter in person, Todoroki commented. Izuku just smiled. Shoto Todoroki, son of the number 2 hero Endeavor. Quirk, Ice and Fire, this was just too perfect. Do you mind if I sit down? I've been on my feet all day and could really use a break. Go right ahead, Shoto nodded at him while carefully examining his opponent. Midoriya's black sleeveless top was torn and ragged looking, the black fingerless glove on his right arm was ripped in places, hair was tousled or maybe it was natural like that, and his face and clothes were smeared and splattered with blood, but there didn't seem to be any wounds on his body. His eyes then landed on the gauntlet on Midoriya's left arm. Yaoyorozu had a plan to get that thing off of him. The first part was for Todoroki to sit here and distract him long enough for everyone to get into position. Thank you. Waving the gauntlet, Izuku made himself a crude chair out of pieces of scrap from around the yard, which he promptly sat on and faced the Udata student that sat a short distance away from him. So let me guess the plan here. Todoroki flinched in surprise, wondering if the villain figured out their plan but kept his composure. Your friends took my soul stone and you stayed behind since you're the strongest of them to keep me busy while they get away. Is that the gist of it? Maybe. The two-tone-haired boy didn't confirm or deny his theory. You called it the soul stone. What does that mean and what does it do? It does something amazing, Izuku smirked at him. Something I once thought was impossible. He didn't elaborate further, so they remained silent for over a minute. Why are you doing this? Todoroki decided to stall by asking questions to keep the other talking. How about this? I'll answer your question if you promise to answer some of mine, Izuku offered while crossing his legs and placing his hands on the knee. That seems reasonable. Todoroki's eyes glanced off, wondering if Momo was ready to give the signal yet. As you are probably aware, I'm quirkless, Izuku began his story. In my entire short life I looked up to heroes. It's not really my fault, the world glamorizes the profession so much that every child wanted to be 1 inch, he paused with a light chuckle. Even after I was diagnosed as quirkless I didn't give up. But you did when you became a villain, Todoroki brought up. When I met All Might, the hero who gave me hope, and found out the truth about him, that he's a fraud, that the world was broken. I decided to fix it, Izuku frowned. I just couldn't leave things as they are. And how are things? The student asked. How are things so bad that you had to go down this path? This isn't a world of heroes and villains. It's a world where the strong are rewarded simply for being strong and the weak are discarded. Todoroki wanted to argue, but Izuku continued. Would you believe your teacher All Might saw no value in me simply because I don't have a quirk? That can't be true, the ice boy did argue against that. Ah, but it is, Izuku smiled sadly. Back before I became Apotheosis I actually got to meet All Might and had interesting conversation with him. I asked if it was possible for me to be a hero without a quirk. He said no, that it wasn't possible, but the sad irony is that All Might is quirkless himself, he's only borrowing someone else's power, he kept talking. So even the #1 hero doesn't believe that hard work, courageous spirit and determination makes a hero, it's all about power. That's not true, Todoroki wanted to argue that those with quirks work hard to hone their abilities. It wasn't always easy for them. Oh really? Izuku raised a brow at that. Katsuki Bakugo is in your class. Do you honestly believe someone like him is hero material? Yes, Shoto answered without hesitating. You're thinking of his quirk when you say that, Izuku sighed while pinching the bridge of his nose. Put his quirk aside and look at Bakugo as a person. Does he inspire hope? Does he make people smile? Is he a good person that does what is right? Or does he only do what he wants? Sometimes people only do things because they want to, not because it's the right thing to do. Izuku knew the difference, and his time with Stain showed him there are many heroes out there like that. Todoroki thought a bit about his classmate. Bakugo was rude, loud, petulant, arrogant, self-centered and seemed to be constantly angry for no good reason. Not at all hero material if he was being honest. Maybe he just needs proper guidance. Todoroki still tried to defend him. Tell me then, Shoto Todoroki, have you, any of your fellow students or teachers done anything to fix his behavior? Izuku smiled, seeing the other boy fail to come up with an immediate answer. Or does Bakugo just bark and everyone lets it go because he's cool and powerful? He knew he was right, and Todoroki's silence was confirming it. I know about him because we used to go to the same middle school, he scowled, remembering the torment that bastard put him through. Bakugo was a bully that constantly threatened and belittled me. He even told me to kill myself once. Does that sound like a hero to you? The half-and-half boy silently watched Midoriya loudly vent. Yet despite his personality, his violent demeanor, and his school record attesting to the bullying, he still got into the prestigious U.A. You must really hate him, Shoto commented. I despise him. He's not the only one, you know. There are many more people like Bakugo out there, and they get everything they want because of their flashy powerful quirks. Izuku glared furiously. Are you starting to see what is wrong with society? Let's say you're right. How would you fix it? Todoroki decided to entertain the idea of a broken hero system. He ignored the nagging voice in his head that kept reminding him that his father was a perfect example of everything Midoriya believed was wrong with their society. Congratulations. Now you're a step closer to the conclusion I came to, Izuku smiled. The only way to fix it is to obtain the greatest power in the world and use it to dethrone those that rule our society. Then I'll be the one to make the rules, and those who I deem unworthy won't be allowed to be heroes in my world. By defeating All Might? Even if you could beat the strongest hero in the world, there are more that would rise up to stop you. Todoroki paused when Midoriya just laughed. Oh no. You really aren't seeing the bigger picture here. Izuku shook his head. Do you honestly think All Might is the king on the chessboard I'm playing against? He was seeking to overthrow the ones above even him. But enough about me and my evil plan. It's time you answered some of my questions. Izuku stared at him with his big green eyes. Why do you never use your fire quirk? Shoto remained silent. Come on. Think of me as a friend, talk to me. We're not friends. You're a villain, so that makes us enemies, Todoroki corrected. Calling us enemies implies that you're a threat to me, Izuku scoffed at him. Which you're not right now. Plus we have some time to kill before I hunt down your friends like dogs and take my stone. My father, Todoroki paused before deciding to continue stalling. Is the number 2 hero Endeavor. Yes, I know, Izuku chuckled. He had done his research after all. For years he's been obsessed with beating All Might and cares for nothing but that goal, Shoto explained with a solemn tone. That rings a familiar bell. Endeavor sounded a lot like Kaken. When he realized he couldn't do it, he decided to create a child that could surpass All Might for him. He married my mother for her quirk with the hopes of having child with both of their quirks. Todoroki's frown deepened at the memory of his mother. I'm the 4th of his offspring. Let me guess, you were the lucky one to be born with both? Izuku asked sarcastically. I wouldn't call it luck, Todoroki scowled. He put me through hell. Training me day and night, just so I could surpass All Might. Did he do this to you? Izuku asked while touching the left side of his own face, pointing out the other scar. No, this was done by my mother when she finally couldn't take living with that man anymore, Todoroki sighed sadly. She called my left side unsightly, and after the incident my father had her locked up in a hospital. Ever since then I vowed to be the number 1 hero without using my left side. I'll deny him what he wants most. At that Izuku let out a loud chuckle. Deny him? By giving him what he wants? The green-haired boy smirked. That's stupid. If you really wanted to get back at your father, then you wouldn't become a hero. That would be the ultimate revenge if you ask me, but no, you're doing exactly as he planned for you, except you're only hurting yourself. I don't expect you to understand, Todoroki said. Because I'm quirkless, right? I can't possibly understand the pressure of having a pro hero as a father or to be blessed with such great quirk, Izuku spat with disdain. You have so much power and yet you're squandering it because of some daddy issues. How pathetic. I guess we can't see eye to eye. Todoroki got up from his seated position, having heard Yaoyorozu's subtle message through the communicator in his ear. Good, everyone is in place. Are we done talking now? Izuku also stood up with a mocking smile. And we were having such a wonderful conversation. Ice gathered around Shoto's right arm as he prepared. Come now. You don't actually believe your pathetic half-powered self can beat me? Alone no less? What makes you think I'm alone? Todoroki allowed himself a small smirk seeing Midoriya's confused face. Izuku's eyes widened when he noticed a large shadow pass over him. Quickly looking up, he was just in time to see the body of a large plane come crashing down on top of him, its speed boosted by Ida as he used his quirk to push it down faster. Izuku on reflex brought his gauntlet up as soon as it collided with him. Release. Uraraka freed both the junked plane and Tenya from the effects of her quirk halfway before the crash. Did that get him? Ida asked aloud as he landed safely next to the crash site. Keep moving. I doubt that will slow him down. Todoroki yelled. Look out! The wrecked plane exploded in a bright red aura as the metal was torn apart like paper. In the center, Midoriya was kneeling on the ground holding the gauntlet up while screaming. Hi-awaya! Izuku stood back up to his feet, pushing the pieces further away from him. With an angry shout, he sent the torn chunks of metal straight at Ida. The young hero in training quickly evaded each and every one. Izuku turned and flash warped away before Kirishima could drop kick him. I see, so you all stuck around to lay a trap for me, Midoriya remarked. Clever, but foolish. He deflected the ice sent his way and sent shards of it at the red-haired boy. Whoa! Kirishima was knocked back. Luckily his hardening ability absorbed the damage he could have sustained. Ida was next, charging in to attack Midoriya. Izuku noticed him coming and created a portal in front of him and one on the ground behind him. Ida went flying through it to his surprise and was promptly kicked in the back. Izuku launched him away with a minuscule amount of strength from One for All. What was that? Momo wondered while watching the fight from a hidden spot. She was attempting to figure out how Midoriya's gauntlet worked and what sort of powers it gave him. It seemed he possessed superior matter manipulation and warping, but that strength just now was too powerful even with his build. He must have some sort of enhanced strength as well. She added that to the list of his abilities and factored into a plan on how to beat him. That won't be enough. Izuku shouted, blowing Shoto away with a finger flick before he could blast more ice at him. Take this. Raising his foot up, he channeled a larger amount of One for All from the Power Stone and stomped it on the ground. In an instant a crater was blown into existence with Izuku floating in the center. Ow! He hissed in pain at his broken leg, but quickly used the Time Stone to heal the damage. What? Shoto stared in shock. Ida too was frozen in horror. Hell, Kirishima finished. What's this? Izuku floated a bit higher in the air. Oh no. No. You were all doing so well. You managed to catch me off guard. Your attacks were consistent, he sighed in disappointment. And now you're all frozen in fear, he slapped his hands together. Don't be scared. Keep fighting, heroes. I'd hate to see you give up now. Izuku smirked. His words seemed to snap them into moving. That and Yaoyorozu voiced through their communicators. Uraraka now. Momo said. Right. Ochako levitated a bunch of junked cars into the air while her fellow classmates neared her. Ida launched one of the floating cars with a rocket-powered kick, while Kirishima punched the second with all his strength and Ochako smacked the others with a large metal beam that she made weightless. That's the spirit. Izuku grinned wider as the rusted vehicles came flying at him from one side while Todoroki's ice surged from behind. He didn't even move from his spot the air, instead he flicked his finger at the ice without turning around, shattering it completely. For the first car to come close to him he completely disassembled with a simple wave of his gauntlet. The next he punched away with the Power Stone and the last he merely held his left armored hand out and touched it. One of the Space Stone's abilities kicked in and covered the object in a blue aura, locking its position in space. Very good. A combination attack. I was wondering when you would get smart and combine your quirks. He applauded them. Or are they? It was then the green-haired teen noticed the small communicators attached to their ears and he began to quickly analyze the situation. Someone else is giving them strategies. Glancing around he couldn't spot this person. Hiding, huh? As Uraraka, Todoroki, Ida, and Kirishima closed in on him, he warped out of there leaving not a trace behind. He's gone. The redhead spun around looking for the villain. Keep an eye out, he's got to be somewhere. Shoto spoke into his communicator. He vanished. Do you have eyes on him? I don't see Midoriya. Momo scanned the surroundings with her binoculars. Spread out and find him. Let everyone know if you do, she ordered. As the group split up to look around the junkyard, Yaoyorozu kept a vigilant eye from a distance. She froze when a hand gently took the binoculars from her grip. Well, hello Momo. Yaoyorozu. Izuku Midoriya crushed the object in his clutch. Quirk creation, and one of the few students to get into U.A on recommendation, the dark-haired girl backed away in panic. Relax, I'm just here to find out which of you has my stone, he chuckled as he held his hands up. No one has to get hurt as long as you dash. Izuku was interrupted when a long wet appendage wrapped around his right arm. Is that a tongue? Gross. Tsuyu released her camouflage. She had been hidden by Yaoyorozu in case Midoriya found their location. Tsuyu, run. Momo created a smoke bomb with her quirk and tossed it at the boy's feet. Please, Izuku chuckled and flicked the smoke away, however he was unprepared for the flash grenade that Momo threw after the smoke. Izuku shielded his eyes with his arm as it went off. When it ended he looked around to see Momo and Tsuyu were gone. Damn it, warping away again he decided on a different approach. Uraraka. Where is he? Heading towards the site where the flashbang went off, Ochako suddenly paused when she felt a presence behind her. Spinning around she saw another portal open and Izuku step out. Hello Uraraka, he smirked as he approached her. It's been a while. You're looking well. I see Mei made that staff for you. He paused when he noticed she took a fearful step back. You're afraid of me, aren't you? He sighed dejectedly. Why? She asked. You know why, Izuku frowned. You've seen it yourself. I never tried to hide the fact that people like me are looked down on by society. He took a step closer to her. What I do seems horrible, yes, but I'm doing this for people like me. Not just the quirkless, but anyone who was weak and was never given the opportunity to be strong because of people like All Might keeping them down. I don't understand. Ochako shook her head sadly. You're a good person. Why be a villain for such a cause? I don't consider myself a villain, Izuku chuckled lightly. I think of myself more as a revolutionary. Tell me, Uraraka, if there was something terribly wrong with the world, what would you be willing to do to fix it? Ochako remained silent, unsure of how to answer. That's what I thought. Izuku sighed and turned away from her. How can you call yourself a hero if you're not willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good of the world? Wait. She reached out to grab his shoulder only for her hand to be repelled away by his power. When you come to the same answer I did, come talk to me then. He walked back through the portal and left without even laying a hand on Uraraka. Intentionally hurting her would have left a bad taste in his mouth. Kirishima. Ijiro glanced around worriedly. This wasn't going as well as he'd hoped. If only he would arrive, then maybe they would actually have more of a fighting chance, but his friend had not responded to his text yet. Ijiro Kirishima, Izuku called, appearing on top of a broken-down truck. Quirk, hardening, a very strong defense, isn't it? Kirishima took a cautious step back since he was alone now. Shall we put it to the test? Or do you want to tell me which one of you has the soul stone? Sorry man, that's not happening, Kirishima said defiantly. That's disappointing. The car Midoriya stood on was levitated up in the air. With a kick he sent the rusted vehicle flying at the red head. Kirishima hardened himself and crossed his arms to absorb the impact. The truck bounced off him while shattering to pieces. He was unprepared for when the engine belt from the wreckage came to life and wrapped tightly around his neck. Kirishima was hoisted up in the air while Midoriya pointed his gauntlet at him. You may have a hard outer shell, like a turtle, but like our dear friend the turtle you still need to breathe. The redhead choked and gasped as he kicked his feet and clawed at the belt around his throat that was growing tighter. Make a hand sign if you want to tell me where my stone is, Izuku chuckled as he continued to strangle him. He wouldn't kill him, but a good bluff required you to pretend that you would kill your opponent. However, the green-haired teen paused when he heard a word shouted that he hadn't heard in over a year. Deku. Izuku spun around just in time to see Katsuki come charging in from the air. With a smirk he released Kirishima and put up a barrier to deflect the oncoming explosion. Bakugo leaped back. You bastard. It seemed Katsuki came prepared, dressed in his hero costume complete with his grenade gauntlets. Kirishima smiled in relief that Bakugo had got his message and came to help. Well, if it isn't Kaken. Izuku chuckled. And here I thought today couldn't get any better. Reaching out with the gauntlet he attempted to crush the boy who bullied him where the brat stood. Quick thinking is the only thing that saved Bakugo as he launched himself out of the area with a blast from his hands. A prime example of what is wrong with the world is delivered right to his karmic justice. Izuku smirked widely. I couldn't have asked for a better gift. I'm going to kick your ass so bad they'll have to pick up pieces of you all over this junkyard, Bakugo responded with a grin of his own. He didn't like this. The old Deku was always terrified of him, as he should have been, but this new version of Deku wasn't even flinching. It really pissed him off. Trying to act tough even though you're still a quirkless loser. Let's see if you're a match for a quirkless loser and his Infinity Gauntlet. Katsuki came charging forward at him with his right arm about to attack. Izuku tilted his body to the left before it reached him and grabbed a hold of it with both hands, flipped him over his body and slammed him into the ground. Katsuki coughed as the air was knocked out of his lungs. Still starting with the right hook, I see. Oh Kaken. You're so predictable. Izuku raised his foot about to stomp him. He was foiled when Kirishima tried to tackle him. Izuku quickly shoved the redhead off, grabbed a nearby broken fridge with the reality stone and tossed it at him. He didn't have time to gloat as an explosion from Bakugo nearly blew him off his feet. Before he could retaliate he was kicked hard in the back by Ida. Nice try. Izuku blocked the next kick with his armored hand. While Izuku was blocking his attacks he didn't notice Katsuki getting some distance and grabbing the pin of his left grenade gauntlet. Get out of the way, Four Eyes. Bakugo shouted as he pulled the pin. A giant explosion erupted from the end of his support item. Ida sped out of the line of fire just as it roared past him. Izuku faced the wave of destruction with a confident grin on his face and let himself be consumed by it. Bakugo smirked, thinking he got him. That excitement quickly bled away when everyone watched as the blast suddenly imploded. The explosion was absorbed and compressed into a small orb in the palm of Izuku's gauntlet, who stood there completely unharmed. Reiya. With a scream the green-haired boy pointed the orb at his former bully and shot a condensed beam of the explosion's heat and force right at him. Luckily for Katsuki he was saved by Kirishima, who shoved him out of the way and took the full blast himself, using his hardening quirk to tank the damage, but that didn't save him from getting launched across the junkyard. Huh? Look at that, Kaken, your boyfriend saved you. Izuku laughed. Damn you. Bakugo charged him from the front while Ida came in from behind. Izuku projected his barrier to block the explosion and opened a warp gate to catch Tenya's attack. The class rep was caught off guard when he was warped directly to Midoriya's right. The gauntlet-wielding villain back-handed him across the face, knocking his helmet off. Izuku grabbed the fallen helmet and threw at Katsuki's head. The blonde ducked, but was surprised when Izuku flash-warped forward and slammed his elbow in his former bully's chest. Guh. Bakugo coughed as he stumbled back. What's the matter, Kaken? You haven't once landed a good hit on me, Izuku smirked down at him as he hovered in the air. I thought you were going to be the #1 hero? Shut your mouth, Deku, Katsuki growled as he stood back up and wiped the spit from his mouth. He was pushed back to the floor by Izuku's power. And now for the coup de grace, suddenly something wrapped tight around his gauntlet that looked very similar to Erasure Head's capture weapon. Following the end of it, he spotted Yaoyorozu attempting to pull the device off his hand. Nice try. Izuku was about to use his right hand to pry them off, but his arm was quickly tangled by a long tongue courtesy of Tsuyu. After that, a grapple claw attached to a tether wrapped around his torso with Uraraka and Ida pulling the other end. With a few tugs he was yanked to the ground. You think this will hold me? Before he could throw them off, his feet were frozen to the ground. A small glacier of ice traveled up his legs and body, stopping just below his neck that wouldn't break no matter how much he thrashed about. Damn it. He was trapped. Did you get him? Kirishima asked as he finally rejoined the group sporting a few minor burns. Get over here and hold this tight, Momo ordered. The redhead did as she said and kept a firm hold on the capture weapon while she went to work on figuring out a way to remove the gauntlet from Midoriya while he was stuck. This won't keep me down for long, Izuku screamed in frustration. He mostly angry at himself for his arrogance and thinking that there was no way they could pose a threat to him. Ochako used her grapple staff weapon on his right arm, so now Uraraka, Ida, and Tsuyu were all pinning that one limb down. Todoroki kept his right hand on the ice prison that held the villain and continuously reinforced it like they planned. It's on his arm really tight, Yaoyorozu said as she struggled with the device. Izuku purposely closed his fist to make it difficult for her while he regarded her with annoyance. What's taking so long? Ida shouted as he and Uraraka dug their feet in the ground. Tsuyu was sweating bullets just keeping her tongue wrapped around the green-haired boy's arm. These weird green sparks kept shooting out his skin were causing his strength to fluctuate for some reason. Hurry and get that damn thing off of him, Bakugo demanded as he kept his other grenade aimed and ready to fire in case Deku escaped. You got to open the fingers up, Kirishima told her while held on with all his strength. They got me, Izuku glared at all of them. He couldn't flash warp away when other people were touching him. He also couldn't stop time as all those who touching his body or the gauntlet would be unaffected. A blast from the reality stone would just leave him open and vulnerable for a retaliating attack. If he used one for all through the power stone, his spine and other parts of his body would be too badly damaged and he wouldn't be able to repair in time for Kaken to fire off his explosion and injure him further. Wait a minute, Kaken. Izuku smiled devilishly as an interesting idea came to mind. Not so tough now, are you, Deku? Katsuki grinned thinking he'd won. You're one to talk. He chuckled. But you know I should be thanking you, Kaken. Izuku glanced down at Momo who fumbled with opening the fingers of his gauntlet. What the hell are you talking about, nerd? The blonde teen scowled at him. Did you see the news? Izuku's smirk widened by the sharp glint in the other's eye that told him he indeed did. You saw All Might's true form. Yes you did. He was taking a bit of a gamble with his assumptions, but he knew Bakugo's greatest weaknesses were his pride and his temper. Do you know why he's so weak now? Shall I tell you? He chuckled darkly. It was the fight against the master of the League of Villains. That battle pushed him past his limit and weakened his body even further than it already was. Izuku locked eyes with Bakugo who remained silent. Remind me why he was there again. Oh that's right, to rescue you. The blonde clenched his fist as the rage began building, not just at Deku for bringing his kidnapping up, but at himself for getting captured in the first place. Dude. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it. Kirishima called, seeing that familiar murderous look in his friend's eye. Momo was just barely managing to slide the gauntlet off, a centimeter at a time. That's right, Kaken. It was because of you. Izuku laughed at him. You're going to make such a wonderful villain in the future. I can see it now. Shut up, the blonde said through his teeth. Katsuki was now shaking in fury. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy who helped cripple All Might. That did it. Bakugo snapped and came charging at the nerd with his hand raised. Don't. Everyone shouted. Dai! Katsuki blasted Izuku right in the face, just as Yaoyorozu had the gauntlet halfway off his arm. She was promptly blown back by the force and lost her grip. The other students also fell back, the tight hold they had on his arms giving way. Even Shoto was knocked back and had to let go of his ice to shield his face and body. When the smoke eventually cleared, it revealed the frozen cocoon that held Midoriya was now empty with a shattered opening where Bakugo's attack hit. They all froze when they heard slow clapping a short distance away. Midoriya stood there, bits of ice still clinging to his skin and clothes, light burn marks on his face and his hair, an even bigger mess than it already was. It seems that explosion knocked him loose enough to quickly warp himself out of there, and with Momo thrown off, there was nothing to restrict the power of the Space Stone. Like I said, Kaken, Izuku smirked as he stopped clapping and held his gauntlet up, putting two specific fingers together to do his own super move. You're so predictable. With only a mere 10% of the stone's power, he snapped his fingers and blew most of the students away with the force of the blast. Kirishima was just close enough to catch the frog girl, which he did. Sadly, Izuku spotted this and grabbed a hold of him with his telekinetic powers. He then threw them hard against a small mountain of broken-down robot parts and appliances. The two of them were knocked unconscious upon impact. 2 down and Izuku's was interrupted when an explosion hit him in the back. Bakugo launched himself over his former childhood friend and began firing off as many explosions as possible. Each and every one of them was sucked up in a small warp gate that Izuku created in between them. Ha! Katsuki screamed as he threw himself at a still smirking Izuku. The green-haired villain blocked his hands with his gauntlet, and since they were close enough, head-butted his bully, forcing him back. Shaking the stars from his head, Izuku looked behind him to see the old smelting factory in the distance. Getting another devious idea, he reached out with his Infinity Gauntlet, using the power and reality stones in tandem. The structure shook violent, quickly coming apart. He let out a strained groan when he started pulling on it, blood dripping from his nose. Hiya! Izuku shouted at the top of his lungs as he yanked his arm towards the blonde, sending big chunks of the large abandoned building flying across the junkyard straight on top of Bakugo while he warp-gated away. Shit! Katsuki cursed as he tried to dodge the falling debris, but wasn't quick enough and was swept up in the impact. Scraps of metal and junk rained down upon the whole area. Tenya. Ida swiftly dodged the falling debris while carrying Ochako on his back. The girl was unconscious after suffering a head injury. He decided to get her to a safe area away from all the chaos before going back to retrieve the others and get out of here. It seems they severely underestimated Midoriya's power. Suddenly he tripped and fell forward. The very dirt he ran on turned soft like quicksand and sucked his foot in. Uraraka flew off his back and was quickly caught by Izuku. Tenya Ida, a pleasure to see you again, Izuku greeted while carrying the girl in his arms. Ida struggled as he was pulled into the ground up to his knees. Apotheosis, the engine boy glared at him. You can call me by real name, you know. Izuku smirked down at him. He gently placed Ochako on the ground, then went back to slowly sinking Ida into the earth. Why? Ida exclaimed. When you saved me from the hero killer, you taught me how a real hero should act. He was up to his waist now. Was all that talk about creating a true hero just a lie? Izuku frowned as he remembered that. Answer me. Ida was nearly underground at this point. That's still my one true goal. He stopped sinking the boy when he was up to his neck, leaving him room to breathe but not escape. I want to put an end to this broken hero society and create a new, better one. There's nothing wrong with this hero society. Tenya tried to argue. You only say that because you're still blind to the truth. Izuku turned away and placed his gauntlet on Ochako's unconscious head, making the boy flinch and fear what he would do to her. For once in your life, Tenya Ida, look around, actually look with your eyes and you'll see what's wrong with this society. Izuku used the time stone to heal the head injury that Ochako sustained and left her there without harm. When you come to same conclusion I did, come talk to me then. With those parting words he opened a warp gate and stepped inside. Shoto. The youngest Todoroki desperately froze all the incoming wreckage while frantically gazing around for any of his fellow students. They could be buried under a pile of rubble and metal for all he knew. He paused when Midoriya appeared through a portal before him. I think it's time we continued where we left off, Todoroki. Izuku smirked deviously. Shoto glared at his enemy and fired as much ice as possible at him. The messy-haired villain raised his gauntlet-covered fist up, channeled one for all through the green stone and punched the incoming ice, shattering it like glass. Damn it, Todoroki tried again, this time shooting ice at him in an arc. Izuku raised a brow at the minor change, but it still wasn't a threat to him. He merely pointed his open hand and used the reality stone's power to instantly melt the ice into water. He also manipulated that water into bubbles just to mock the half and half boy. "That all you got, Todoroki?" Izuku taunted him. "Where's the fire?" "I refuse to use that bastard's power." Shoto would deny his father to the very end. "How do you expect to be a hero with that attitude?" Izuku glared at him. "I'm sorry ma'am, I couldn't save your daughter because I have severe daddy issues." "That's you, that's the hero you're going to be in the future." "You know why I won't." He was cut off before he could remind his opponent. "You don't have a choice anymore, Shoto Todoroki." Izuku yelled at him. "This is your one and only chance to stop me, right here right now." He held his arms out. "I can't." Shoto clenched his fists. "Will you just forget about Endeavor?" Izuku let out a frustrated sigh. "You're not him, you're not even an upgraded version of him. You are unique, and that's something your pathetic father can never lay claim to." He continued to try and bring out the best of his opponent. Not just because he wanted a good fight, but mainly he wanted to help Todoroki. He could tell that the bicolor-haired guy was miserable. "You have ice and fire? That's not the power of Endeavor, it's the amazing power of Shoto. It's all yours. It's mine." Shoto suddenly realized. In that instant, fire erupted from his left side, lighting up the entire junkyard like a beacon. A raging inferno, suppressed for years, finally set free. Izuku just laughed and clapped his hands. "Magnificent. Absolutely wonderful," he complimented. "Doesn't it feel great? To let go and just be yourself." Izuku knew all too well how liberating it felt. "I'm starting to think you might be crazy." Shoto cracked a grin of his own. "To help the person trying to defeat you. Can you defeat me now? That's the real question." Izuku flexed his wrist and fingers in the armored device. "You'll find out, as long as you don't dodge this." Shoto took a firm stance and pulled his left arm back. "I have no intention of dodging." Izuku matched his stance. "Give me your best. Give me everything." Todoroki did just that, unleashing the biggest flame he could muster straight at him. Izuku held his gauntlet out to stop it. He projected his barrier to halt the fire, even amplified it with the power stone. "I'm actually being pushed back." Izuku noticed the strength of the flames was causing his feet to skid backwards. "Very good, Shoto. I'm impressed." Drawing more power from the stones, he tried to force the massive torrent of flames down, but they weren't letting up. Izuku started to sweat under the heat, having underestimated Shoto a bit. That momentary lapse in concentration caused his force field to fall, and the mossy-haired villain was abruptly consumed by the fire. Shoto finally stopped when his flames passed over the place Midoriya was standing. As the embers dispersed into smoke, he nearly stumbled on his feet. It took a few moments to catch his breath, since that last attack took a lot out of him, but it looked like he won. Any feeling of victory was short-lived when he felt a metal hand grab his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Shoto," Midoriya said from behind him. "You got over your hatred for your father and hit me with everything you had." "You cheated," Shoto said in anger. "Did I?" He glanced back anxiously at Izuku to see his top was completely gone, burned off, revealing a toned upper body covered in light burns that seemed to be healing by some strange yellow energy. "I took your fire head on, but it was too much for me and I had to warp away." "You did well, and you're going to make a wonderful hero in the future." He spun Todoroki around and delivered a solid punch to the face with his right hand, knocking him down and out. "That was interesting." Izuku stared down at the other's unconscious body. His hand suddenly lashed out and grabbed a small cannonball right out of the air that was fired at him. "A sneak attack, Yaoyorozu? I like that." He turned to face Momo, who stood a short distance away holding a cannon. "Actually, it's a diversion." Yaoyorozu dropped the cannon and produced a trigger mechanism. Activating it caused the metal ball in Midoriya's hand to explode into a carbon fiber net that wrapped around his body. "This again?" Izuku grabbed part of the net with both hands and, after channeling green sparking energy from the power stone, tore the fibers like tissue. "You know, I think I'm starting to get the hang of my new stone. All Might's power is hard to control in large quantities, but in small doses it does wonders for me." He chuckled while purposely letting slip whose strength he was now wielding. He certainly enjoyed the pale look of shock on Momo's face. "So now what? What will you do, Momo Yaoyorozu?" He slowly started walking towards her. At first she was doubting that this would accomplish anything. "No. I can do this." Shaking the doubt from her mind, she tried to desperately reassure herself that the plan would work. Izuku stopped and gave her a moment to compose herself, but also to exercise a bit of caution. He honestly didn't see her as much of a threat, but after these students had managed to pin him down, he decided to keep an eye open for any traps. Momo took a deep breath and removed something glowing from her pocket. Izuku's eyes narrowed, finally seeing his soul stone. "What are you up to?" he wondered as she pointed her bare hand at him. Using her quirk, she created something to surround her limb. He smirked when he finally realized what it was. A metal chrome gauntlet that looked very similar to his own Infinity Gauntlet, with only a single slot on the back of the palm. "Let's see how you handle your stone used against you." Momo raised her own gauntlet. With all the information she gathered during the fight, she figured that she now had a good understanding of how Midoriya's device worked. Enough to make a replica of it. "Take this," she exclaimed as she punched the air in his direction. Nothing happened. Momo tried again, but still no effect or reaction out of the stone. "Ah!" Izuku laughed at her. "You didn't honestly believe that would work?" He continued to mock her. "You're intelligent, Yaoyorozu, but you can't even begin to understand the vast complexity of my Infinity Gauntlet," he smirked arrogantly at her. "Let me guess, you essentially tried to make a remote control. Using electrical pulses to forcefully activate the power inside the stone." Her eyes widened in surprise. That was exactly how she made her own gauntlet. She truly thought that's how it worked. Just how intricate was Midoriya's Infinity Gauntlet? "I know, because I made the same mistake when I built the first prototype," he chuckled, remembering his past failures fondly. "Even if you did make a perfect replica, it wouldn't make any difference," Izuku said as he pointed his invention at the ground between them. "The Soul Stone's power has no effect on someone like me," he frowned sadly. Making a pulling motion, he caused the dirt to slide towards himself, essentially turning the ground beneath Yaoyorozu's feet into a treadmill. "Now give me the stone." Izuku held his right hand out to catch her. Unfortunately, an explosion nailed him from behind right before she was in arm's reach. Kh. It didn't do any damage, but surprised him more than anything. Spinning around, he came face to face with a battered and slightly bleeding Bakugo. Momo took her chance to run off, much to Izuku's annoyance. "You damn nerd," Katsuki panted. "Throw another building at me and see what happens." He was able to dodge some of the raining debris, but the rest he had to put his quirk into overdrive just to survive, and even then he still took a few hits. "I thought you'd be fine," Izuku smirked. "How do you expect to surpass All Might if you can't handle that much?" "Just shut up already," the blonde growled out. "No," Izuku glared at him. "The time you can talk down to me is over." He faced his former bully with confidence. "You know, Kaken. The same day I understood the truth about All Might is the same day I understood the truth about you." The other boy just stared daggers at him. "You're just a child playing at being a hero. That's all you've ever been, and that's all you'll ever be." "And what are you?" "Just a crybaby that's throwing a fit because he couldn't be a hero without a quirk." Bakugo yelled back while Izuku just laughed at his insult. "I have no interest in being a hero anymore. I've got a much greater goal in mind," he said. "I'm going to create a new hero society, and you Katsuki Bakugo won't be part of it," he chuckled darkly. "They won't even remember you by the time I'm done." Katsuki fumed and came charging at him. "Come on." Izuku braced himself and held his gauntlet out to guard against the explosion he knew was coming. The blast created a large smokescreen that obscured his vision. Katsuki managed to knock him back into a wall of scrap behind Midoriya and proceeded to hammer him with more explosions. "Do you remember me now?" Bakugo screamed as he continued to blast him. Having enough, Izuku powered through the explosions and punched him square in the cheek. The blonde's face met the dirt from the strength of that fist. Izuku marched towards while Bakugo pushed himself off the ground and spat out the blood from his mouth. "Is that it?" Izuku smirked at him. Katsuki snarled and launched himself at him again. Using his quirk, he propelled himself around the villain in an erratic pattern, hoping to attack a vulnerable spot. He was sent flying again when a large truck tire came at him out of nowhere. "Oops!" Izuku chuckled. With a shout, Bakugo leaped to his feet, blasted himself straight at Midoriya while dodging the pillars of earth that emerged from the ground. Spinning his body, he managed to kick Midoriya in head, then plant his boot on the boy's Infinity Gauntlet, keeping it pinned to the ground while the blonde threw an explosion point blank in his face. Izuku felt something wet on his cheek as the smoke dissipated. Reaching up with his other hand, he felt a small cut there, not even worth healing with the time stone. All that for a drop of blood? Izuku smirked as he looked at the small red stain on the tip of his finger. Chuckling to himself, he threw Bakugo off of his device. Katsuki stumbled back, giving him the opportunity to rush in and deliver multiple empowered punches to the hero student's face and stomach. Gah! Bakugo tried to shield himself with his left arm, which caused the grenade gauntlet to be shattered with one punch. With a powerful uppercut he sent Katsuki sailing through the air. "Look at you go!" Izuku clapped his hands in mock applause. Bakugo struggled to stand back up on his feet and shake the dizziness from his mind. "Wouldn't it be easier just to stay down? You can't beat me, Kaken. No matter how hard you try. I thought I told you to shut up, you damn nerd." Katsuki spat as he finally steadied himself. "I'll beat you. Heroes are always win, so that's what I'll do," he shouted with resolve. He wouldn't let Deku beat him no matter the cost. So then, Izuku's face darkened. "If you can't win, by your own logic that would mean you're not a hero, right?" He chuckled before smirking at the spiky blonde-haired teen. "What makes you think you even deserve to win? Do you know what you are, Katsuki Bakugo?" Izuku paused before listing off all the other boys' failures. "You couldn't beat that slime villain, you lost to me once before at USJ, you couldn't make Todoroki use his full power at the sports festival, you failed to beat All Might in your exam, you got captured by the League of Villains, and you failed your provisional license exam. Do you know why? It's because you're a loser." Bakugo's eyes widened. "You've always been a loser. That's why you bully and belittle people to hide your own pathetic feelings of inadequacy and self-hatred." The blonde was shaking at how Izuku was describing him and naming everything that marred his once perfect record. "Deku," he said through clenched teeth. Making a circle with left hand he fired a large explosion through the small hole his hand made, condensing it into a beam, his patented armor-piercing shot. Izuku smirked and held up his gauntlet, amplifying the barrier around it to split the beam apart. Slowly he made his way towards Katsuki while simultaneously deflecting his super move. When he was close enough he pushed forward, backhanding the student across the face. Bakugo was about to pull the pin of his only remaining grenade and blast his childhood friend point blank, but Izuku grabbed his gauntlet with his own. He then sent a pulse of red energy into the other's limb that obliterated his grenade device and broke his right arm in 3 places. Rah! Fighting through the pain of his shattered right arm he used his left to deliver the largest explosion he could muster at Midoriya's chest. The blast created a giant pillar of heat and smoke where Izuku once stood. Bakugo was coughing uncontrollably, left arm feeling dislocated, but not broken like his right. From out of the black smoke a golden gauntlet reached out and grabbed Katsuki by the throat and hoisted him up in the air off his feet. He gasped, but didn't have the strength nor the functionality in his arms to struggle. Izuku appeared out of the smoke with a pleased smirk on his face. His big eyes shifting from bright green, to red, blue, yellow and finally his normal emerald-colored ones. "This is checkmate, Kaken." The burns and cuts on his bare-muscled torso were quickly healed by his time stone. It seems Katsuki's explosion was able to penetrate his epidermal barrier after all. "How?" Bakugo struggled to speak with the other's hand around his throat. "How is someone, like you, so strong?" After staring him the eyes for a few moments he finally answered. "Because I was born weak," Izuku said honestly. "I know what it's like to be weak, and that's what makes me strong." Cocking his right fist back he channeled a small amount of One for All and punched Katsuki right in the gut, hard enough to make him spill the contents of his stomach. After throwing the defeated blonde to the ground he forced him onto his knees facing the other way, holding him in place with a hand gripping his spiky hair. "Now then, Kaken, for once in your miserable life you're going to help me," he whispered in the other's ear. "All right, Yaoyorozu. You can come out now," he called out loud. Counting to 10, nothing happened as Izuku expected. "If you want Bakugo to live, you will show yourself." He tried again only to receive silence in return. "Have it your way." "Wait." Momo finally revealed herself from behind a pile of old rusted cars. "Don't hurt him. Whether or not I do anything to him depends entirely on you." Izuku smiled at her. "The thing is, Yaoyorozu, I really like you. Not just you, all of you Data students that came here to try and stop me. I admire your courage to face an opponent that completely outclasses you. I would feel so terrible killing any of you guys." That was truth. He actually didn't want to kill any of these heroes in training. Katsuki here on the other hand, well, I hate his guts. He's everything I despise and I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep splattering him all over this junkyard. He's bluffing, Bakugo thought while he was sweating under Izuku's murderous intent. He has to be. You can save his life, Momo. All you have to do is give me my soul stone. Izuku narrowed his eyes at her. The choice is yours. I'll even make it easy for you. He grabbed Bakugo's shoulder with his Infinity Gauntlet and started forcing the matter-manipulating power through his body. Katsuki screamed in pain as his body was covered in a red aura. "Hurts, doesn't it, Kaken? That's the feeling of your molecules slowing, being pulled apart." You know, I've always wondered what it would look like when a person's entire molecular structure was disassembled in an instant. Shall we see? Stop! Momo shouted at him. Izuku stopped torturing his former bully and focused on her. The dark-haired girl nervously pulled out the black and purple glowing stone from her pocket. With a heavy sigh she tossed it at him. Midoriya caught it with his right hand and looked amused at it. Yes, my beautiful soul stone. Good job, Yaoyorozu. His eyes lit up with further amusement. I must compliment you on such a good forgery, Momo gasped at him, having figured it out so easily. But how? He cut her off with a quick laugh. Come now. I created these stones, you don't think I can't tell a real one from a fake? He crushed the copied soul stone in his hand and noticed the small sparks from the microchips planted inside. A fake stone with a tracking chip hidden inside. Very clever, but just for that I'm taking Bakugo's legs. The red glow covered Katsuki again as he prepared to do as he said. No, wait. Momo pleaded. She frantically pulled out the real stone from her other pocket. That's better. Izuku stopped. Walk over to me and place it in my hand, he ordered with a serious frown on his face and a wary eye on her person. Doing as he commanded, Yaoyorozu slowly made her way over to him, casting a concerned look towards her captured fellow classmate who sat there on his knees panting. The shirtless villain smiled as he held his right hand out when she was in touching distance. Hesitantly Momo obeyed and placed the stone in his palm. Thank you, he whispered as he held the gem in his fingers victoriously. You got what you wanted, she glared at him. Now let Bakugo go. Of course, with a wide grin he threw Katsuki a short distance away into a pile of scrap and junk. Oh, and for the record, I was bluffing and was never going to kill him, he chuckled, making the girl's eyes widen in shock. With a satisfied look he took the soul stone and placed it in the last open slot of his gauntlet, inside the palm of the hand. Aya! Izuku screamed as the new power surged into him. The feeling was much more intense than all the other stones. Neon purple nerve-like patterns covered his body as his eyes glowed the same. Momo, who was still standing right there, was nearly blown away by the shockwave that emanated from him. When it subsided he gazed down at the soul stone and his now completed Infinity Gauntlet. He smiled proudly at having finally completed the greatest invention in human history. I'd love to continue playing with you all, but I've got bigger fish to fry. Farewell, Momo. Yaoyorozu. Izuku created a portal directly behind him that he stepped back into. Give my regards to your friends, he waved at her before closing it, leaving her alone, but not for long. Where did he go? Kirishima appeared carrying a barely conscious Tsuyu. Following him Uraraka appeared looking completely unharmed, while Ida was next to her covered in dirt. Todoroki, having recovered, also appeared walking over to Yaoyorozu as she collapsed to her knees. Are you alright? He asked. Did he hurt you? I'm fine, her voice sounded shaky and far from fine. Bakugo is badly injured, he needs medical attention. Swallowing her nerves, Momo pointed to where Katsuki lay in a heap. This is my fault. Uraraka looked around at her injured and scared friends, feeling responsible for all this chaos. If she hadn't come here, they wouldn't have followed her and none of this would have happened. That's what she thought, and now she would have to deal with the consequences. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. See you on the next part.